Halo, halo, dzień dobry. Witam was, moi kochani. Bardzo serdecznie.
Hello, Diablo community. Welcome to another
Zdążyłem.
Diablo 4 campfire chat. This is our PTR campfire chat for season 8. My name is Adam Fletcher. I'm the director of community here. Of course, I'm joined by this panel. A lot of familiar faces. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Colin Finer. I'm a
Colin jest, całe szczęście.
Hey, I'm Derek Nunez. I'm a lead
Dobra.
seasons designer.
Wojciech Van Helsing, Szaman, PB0, Sagan, Garnitron, Kuba, Babaś, Kogu,
Awesome. And we're
Bikte,
also joined
Kubiak, Buddy,
Ruben Marquez,
Nightbot,
aka Bloodshed. He's actually
PB0.
behind the
Kogoś
scenes. He'll be
pominąłem?
playing through some gameplay that we're going to be showing off here in a little bit. Oh, there he is. He's saying hi, waving. We'll see more of him here in a little bit when with maybe not Marak dancing more. We got to see a good minute and a half of him before the stream actually started. Crazy day. First, I do want to start off with that we had a smoothie delivery this morning, and Marcus is not here. As you can see, I'm here hosting this because he forgot my smoothie in the order. So I just kicked him off the stream. No, I'm just kidding. But I told him I'd bring it up because I'm like, oh, my smoothie's not here. But either way, we have a lot to talk about regarding season 8. Important things, and that's actually the end of the stream. So
Dzień dobry.
that's all I wanted to bring up. Now, we have a lot to talk about for season 8 PTR, but I know a few other topics that we wanted to hit on was kind of related to some of the quality of life stuff that's going to be coming with this specific season based off of, feedback and things we've seen within the game. And also one big topic is around mid-season updates. It's actually something that a lot of people have been asking about. And we do want to give a little bit of an update.
Dobra, ja to muszę zapisywać.
Mid-season updates will be going forward.
Where is
How we're kind of thinking about it from here. So,
Babaś, dzięki ci wielkie mordeczko. Nawet kurde nie mam jak napić się twojego zdrowia, bo jeszcze nie mam kawy, ale za chwilkę będzie. Dopiero weszłem, przepraszam was.
Talk about the history of the mid-season balance patch. Originally, when we had talked about mid-season, it was pretty early in the life cycle of Diablo 4. We would add a ton of items, and we do, sort of envision doing a lot of big swings in terms of big nerfs to overperforming builds and big buffs to underperforming builds.
Twoje zdróweczko,
But as we've seen,
mordeczko.
we've added more progression and things like Season 4 itemization. There's a lot
gorącą
more time
kawą.
investment in terms
Ale
of
warto.
getting your build online and really refining and optimizing it. And what we found is when you put so much time into your character, it feels really bad when we nerf things, right?
Ja to będę pisał.
Season 6 is a great example where you might have done so much work to temper your gear and masterwork your gear and level up those paragons that we were really hesitant to do like a big nerf swing as part of the mid-season balance patch. Sort of on the other hand, right, we didn't want
Czego się
to
spodziewacie?
massively buff underperforming builds to match the overperforming builds. 'Cause we
Nie,
didn't
ja
wanna
dalej
create this
bezalkoholowo się
insane,
trzymam, moi
sort of
kochani.
arms race and then we're at pit tier 9,000, right? It'd be ridiculous. So what we ended up doing was actually kind of like anemic number tweaks. Like they weren't really necessarily making a big impact, and we took a step back and sort of asked
Też mi
ourselves,
się
like,
wydaje, że
well,
będą pierdolić
what are we
tylko...
actually getting out of this? What are you, the players, actually getting out of this? And I
No
think
nic,
we're
pozostał nam Dragon
at a
King.
sort of point where we
Graliście
wanna
w Dragon
pivot
Kina?
and
Widziałem, że
adjust
większość
our
streamerów to
philosophy a
streamuje
little bit.
teraz.
And I think we've already seen some of this philosophy come to life in Season 7.
Yeah, exactly. I know, especially in the beginning of the season, people probably saw us make some tweaks in the first couple weeks related to some really
Urech.
crazy numbers.
Kurwa, myślę, że to urech to chyba nie
Maybe they
dostaniemy
weren't even
nigdy.
numbers in some of the stuff that people saw in the start of the actual season.
Yeah. So all that is to say, I think really what we're going to start taking a look at is not doing massive swings in the
Pamiętajcie, że
mid-season, but instead
Dragon
focusing our
King
efforts
jest
on the launch
twórców
of the season. So
Chaos
we're
Bane'a,
going to take that time
który jest
and we're going to
totalnym
make sure
gównem.
that there's a much higher quality launch release and taking a lot of that balance time and making sure that when we do launch a season, it's higher quality, right? We want the pit tier disparities to be a little bit lower. We want to make sure that, when a new season launches, the new builds that we're adding are going to be really effective.
Kupiłem sobie nową
There's a lot of
drukarkę
fun
3D.
ways to play.
Z ciekawszych
This
rzeczy.
doesn't mean we're never going to
Jestem ja bardzo excited.
It actually means we're just going to shift our efforts to the beginning of the season. So early on, we're going to be pretty vigilant in terms of things that
Działa,
are underperforming
zapierdala.
or way overperforming and acting quickly on them.
Yeah, the goal here is really to get everything closer in terms of just less egregious, builds being super high up there. We saw that I think specifically in season 6 with
mid-season
Warren,
patche
it
wypadają.
stayed consistent that way. We know we got a lot of feedback of hey, this feels kind of kind of poopy if you know, my build is like, you know, 30, 40 pit tiers below. And so the goal is really to kind of bring and keep things more aligned, especially at the start of the season. So as Colin mentioned, in the first couple weeks, I know there's going to be more effort in putting tweaks during that time to really respect the players' time.
Drukarka, Bamboo Lab A1.
That timing is really important because
Mam wydruki, potem
our
pokażę.
mid-season updates in the past had come a month or a month and a half into the season once players have been really invested in their build. And now we're going to be much more focused on rapid updates, you know, within a week or two after the season.
A słychać teraz, że się drukuje? Bo ona obok mnie jest i drukuje.
Adjustments, it is at a point where, hey, you're not, you know, you're not complete with the season. You're not done yet, and you can adjust and you can, you know, make sure that your time is respected in that way.
Definitely. So to really clarify, you know, when a season launches, I'll use Bloodwave as an example. That was something we saw
Uchwyt
pretty
do
early on,
areografu.
and it was way too overtuned, right? Like you didn't even really have to invest in your character to get to a point where you're godlike. And that is something that we would probably act quickly on as a part of the next season, for example.
And I think like a big point of clarity is like if Bloodwave using that as an example is very much an S tier build right now in this season.
S plus.
S plus for sure. I think that the goal is not to immediately take it to F or even immediately take it to C or anything
Czy
like
oni
that.
powiedzieli,
Keep it still
bo się
in
nie umiem
F,
skupić,
but, like,
czy oni
also
powiedzieli,
make
że
sure
nie
that it's
będzie,
still at least lined up with like the
że
other
będzie mid-season patch,
builds
ale
that
nie
might be
balance
up there in
patch.
that top tier.
Conversely, too,
Filament,
I just want to
filament.
make it super clear. If we see things that we added that are new, for example, if the seasonal powers aren't performing in a way that feels really powerful and crunchy, we're going to be buffing those. So it's not only looking out for the S+, it's also looking for the things that missed the mark. So we're going to be buffing those also.
Awesome. Yeah, so
Awesome.
I know that players
Ja będę musiał
at the
przesłać
start of
chyba
season
sobie jeszcze
8 will
raz.
see us be a lot more reactionary towards those first
In the
couple
early.
weeks in the early part of that season. So yeah, just wanted to clarify that with players because we've seen.
Ale
a lot
słychać
of
tą
it
drukarkę
talking
w tle?
about
Jak się
mid-season
odzywam na
updates,
przykład?
is
Bo ona tu
this
obok
a
mnie
mid-season
napierdala.
update when they see a
Yeah,
patch or something like that. And so going forward, I know that's going to be the plan as we look at updating the game in the future.
And if you hide things early, I will Liam Neeson your ass. I will know. I will know.
There you go.
Nawet kamerka jest z
Colin's just
drukarki.
waiting behind you. Just that's what he does.
Yeah, in the closet.
Yeah.
Like the little demon kid right behind you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The other thing that we want to talk about is kind of like state of the game, especially with season 7, where we're at, and kind of how we're looking at that towards season 8. I think one of the biggest points of feedback we've heard related to season 7 is kind of the pace of the game. It's, you know, sometimes you blink and you're level 20 and you're like, holy crap.
O,
what happened?
kurwa.
So I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about that as well.
O
Yeah,
kurwa,
absolutely. So,
uwaga, ważne
just
rzeczy.
Sort of our perspective on season 7 has been
Cześć,
the
Son Goku.
progression is very fast.
O
Way faster
kurwa.
than we sort of expected. Part of it is a lot of the really cool new seasonal powers.
Uwaga, zapnijcie
Part of
pasy.
it's the headhunts being super lucrative and
Jest
awesome.
za szybka
And part of
progresja,
it's
więc
also
żeby
just
było
like
fajniej,
seasonal
zrobimy
journey
jeszcze
and
szybszą.
reputation board. There's a lot of
Dobra,
different ways
zapnijcie
to get
pasy,
into power
kurwa.
Diablo 4. And what we've seen is compared to season 6, which had a lot of positive feedback as part of our revamped progression model, is that a lot of that has sort of gone down the drain in terms of how fast players are chewing through some of the content. So we actually have a graph that we could look at. I apologize, this is terrible, but I just pulled it from the our sort of stat page. It's not the greatest, but this is a picture of season 6. You can see on the y-axis here, it was taking roughly people around 15 to 17 hours on average to get to max level. We felt like that was a pretty good journey, right? Part of Diablo is that sort of zero to hero journey, and part of what's fun about leveling is you start
Ale
to sort of form a
kurwa,
build
serio?
and find a lot of
Przecież
different pieces
ludzie
early
robili
on,
fabułkę
which is
sobie,
form your
halo,
character, where
kurwa.
customization is
Dlatego
really fun,
robili
right? You're not
w chuj
necessarily
szybko
locked
ją.
into a build.
Znaczy w chuj
So
wolno
we
ją.
felt like that was a pretty good,
Jeżeli oni opierają się o te
clip
staty,
for
to
hitting
trochę
max level.
chujnie.
It's on average, right? So you could either go faster or slower depending on sort of how much of a blaster you are. So we felt like that was a pretty good average. Especially with difficulty tiers and
Cześć,
your
Artur.
ability to sort of go faster or slower based on your pacing.
Bo dobrze
let's go to
pamiętam, że
season
sezon
7
6
now.
to był
And it
ten z
nearly
dodatkiem.
doubled.
Yeah?
So you can see that it was taking about 9 hours on average, which is kind of insane, right? Again, this is the average. So if you're,
Cześć, Szymek.
if you're like a Wudijo of the world, it's probably more like 2 hours or like 30 minutes. And that was something that we definitely feel like has sort of missed the mark in terms of that initial journey. So we are going to be making some changes just to adjust for a lot of the seasonal power and things like that. We're not going to necessarily nerf the power
Cześć,
of the
Jakub.
seasonal power. We still want you to feel powerful, but we are going to essentially take a look at the 1 to 25 experience and just smooth that out a little bit, which is going to
A little
essentially
bit.
make the level
Ja bym to,
experience
kurwa,
a little
tak
bit closer to
zmienił.
season 6. So it is going to be a slower from 1 to 25.
Ja bym to tak
but
pozmieniał.
one thing we've done to sort of compensate that is we've taken a look at the itemization. We don't like that rares and sort of magic items immediately disappear after the first 5 minutes.
O kurwa,
I think,
czekaj,
you
czekaj.
kind of get to that point
Co
where we
oni
were
mają
talking
na-
about, if you get to
na-
like level 20, you blink and you're level
Yeah.
20,
Oh, I
and then
have
at the
all
same time
legendaries.
you blink and you're like, blues and yellows, like
Yeah.
I only look at oranges now, or
Yeah.
like what's this other color? So
Yeah.
I know that we have some changes that you want.
Cześć, Michael, witam
Yeah,
wszystkich.
and again, like a lot of this is in the spirit of making
Dobra,
sure
to
that
są
your
ważne
journey
rzeczy teraz.
is really satisfying, right? That's what
Ja
makes
ciekaw
it
jestem,
so
jak bardzo
awesome
to
when
zmienią.
playing Diablos, that sort of
Pewnie
I start with
znowu do
nothing
tego
and become
samego
a
wrócę.
god, right? So we are taking a look at the itemization so that it doesn't just feel like a slog from 1 to 25. What we're going to be doing is, you know what? I'm going to jump actually into the legendaries really
Players will
quick.
get to
It's
know.
really important, a really important part of this. The other thing that was contributing to this leveling sort of pace was that players are getting a legendary every 3 to 4 minutes, and that's from 1 to 60. That's not just in the end game. And it just felt like legendary item quality was just
Okay. Magic item can
too
give
prevalent across
to
the
2
leveling
affix.
journey. You didn't have,
Okay.
you sort of hit max level. There was no journey to assembling your build. You just had everything as part of the Codex of Power. So we're also reducing the legendary rate from leveling. We're not really touching the end game legendary drop rates, but from leveling, we're adjusting that. And to compensate that, to jump back into the
Okej,
magic and rares.
zmieniają
We're making it so that magics can
drop
have up to 2
legendarek
affixes.
przy
So sometimes you're gonna
levelowaniu
find, you know, from
i robią
1 to
magiczne
25,
i rare
pretty
itemy
good magic
troszeczkę
item.
lepsze,
It might
ale
actually be
nadal
better than a rare, for example,
pizdy
'cause it
są.
might have dropped earlier for you, it might have higher eye power. And then we're also making it so that rares can sometimes have
szybkim
up to 3
przetłumaczeniu.
affixes. And what that means is, you know, when you get a drop at level 35 from a Whisper Cache, right now, you know, in Season 7, it feels terrible when you don't get a legendary item because you
Cześć,
just
Fox.
know that it's just not even worth looking at, right? But now that rare items can have up to 3 affixes, that means that you might have a really good imprintable base. It means all the rares that drop across the game from 1 to 60 could actually be pretty great gear for you, especially with all of our crafting options. So we think that this helps smooth out the 1 to 60 journey. I will caveat that the rare quality is not the best at max level still. It's going to be a lower eye power, so you're not going to have to filter through a bunch of rares at max level. We're not going to go back to pre-season 4. So yeah, we think this is this sort of smoothing out of the leveling curve.
Co ty myślicie?
Taking a look at the magic rarities or the item qualities. is
Mały
just gonna
kroczek
make
w
the
dobrą
experience feel
stronę?
a lot more rewarding and satisfying as you go through these levels.
Mi się wydaje, że to malutki kroczek. Zależy jak
And
to
I
się będzie
know,
ogrywało.
some of the other items we've been talking about have been like a little bit of that torment progression.
Yeah.
Tylko, że jeżeli oni się opierają, nie, to będzie dalej z dupy. Dla nas, normalnych graczy, to będzie dalej z pizdy.
Something I know we're making tweaks to.
Mogę wam powiedzieć dlaczego
Yeah,
też.
so the other half of Diablo is obviously the max level endgame, right? And we've heard a ton of feedback that like, you know, it just feels like a weekend game right now. You can just blast through all the torment tiers. There's nothing that's really satisfying about it. There's nothing to work towards just because you're just getting so much power so frequently and just really crushing
Budzisz
this
mnie rano?
content.
Bo mogę mieć ciężko
So what
wstać.
we've done here is, if
No
we
jak
go
mój
to the
budzik będzie
slide,
napierdzielał.
we've actually given, actually let me jump into some of the stats here because I think it's really interesting. A lot of people got to Torment 4 very quickly. So on average, it was taking players around 15 hours to get to Torment 4. That's like roughly double how quickly it took in Season 6, which is kind of insane. Again, it's the culmination of seasonal powers and all this crazy stuff going on. And the other part of it is that 50% of players are actually hitting Torment 4. And just from a philosophy standpoint, we really want like whatever the hardest Torment tier is, in this case Torment 4, to be aspirational. And to us, that means around 10%. That means that,
kurwa.
you know, if you're really Johnny Badass, you know, you need to
A
be
i
in the
kiedy,
top 10% of
na
players
jakim
to
teraz
actually
się
get there.
zaczyna Tormencie
And,
4
it's not hitting the mark.
picie?
So what we're going to do is make some adjustments. So Torment 1 is now going to start at pit tier 10, which means we've effectively added 10 pit tiers to the pit, because now Torment 1 starts earlier. And then we've also increased the Torment pit
Ty, ja Diablo
scaling,
3 Resurrected
health
bym
by
pograł.
roughly 20% multiplicative, and then some damage
Weźcie Diablo
increases.
3,
Yeah, and that,
feeling
that
walki
pit
z Diablo
scaling
4,
is,
w sensie
every
animacje,
level of the pit
dźwięki
is
i tak
multiplicative
dalej.
on previous levels. So it's not just like, oh,
I
whatever pit
grafikę.
I was at, it's now 20% harder. It's actually like kind of stacking 20% every level. So the end result is that, you know, a pit tier 100 is much harder than it was before, and that will that makes it, you know, harder to reach that absolute highest end, and gives you a little bit more for those builds and those blasters who are getting up to that highest pit tier. It's gonna be quite a bit harder to get to quite that same level next season.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, sort of culminates in moving Torment 1 to pit tier 10 and effectively adding 10 pit tiers and increasing the multiplicative scaling of the pit tier scaling.
Ja wam powiem,
The
że to
journey
będzie,
is gonna
że
be a
to
lot
będzie
more
kurwa
sort
tragedia.
of satisfying. There's a lot more
Już
sort
wam
of,
mówię dlaczego.
peaks
Mogę je
to
ściszyć
climb.
na chwilę, dobra?
And it also means pit tier 1.
Na ten moment w grze zostali tylko ci, którym aktualny stan gry odpowiada. Nowych, znaczy z tych graczy, których to wkurwia, nie przyciągną tak małą zmianą, tak nieznaczną, a tych, którym to odpowiada, tylko wkurwią.
Vote on the silly thing that I do. Conversely, I just want to cover this really quickly, though. Torment 4 isn't going to be insanely harder than it was before. It's going to be roughly around pit tier 76s on live right now, so season 7. So think about the game that you're playing right now. Torment 4 is going to be about 11 pit tiers harder. So it's still achievable.
To
It's
nie jest
just
dodawanie
that upper end
tormentów.
is
Po
also
prostu
just going to be that much
przesunęli
harder
poziom
to
trudności,
sort of climb through.
jak jest trudny.
So we got a lot of changes coming for like torment scaling. Obviously, some itemization changes. So the big thing being, as you're leveling up, you're going to see a lot more opportunities to find items, especially with the changes to blue and yellow items there. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the big caveat is like at 60, the item power on legendaries is still going to be
Ta jedna to teraz 20 pit, a te 4 to teraz który pit?
the best items to actually grab. So yeah, lots of big changes coming up. Great to actually walk through all of them. I know we have a ton more to talk about specifically around the new season. So thank you, Colin. We're gonna jump over to Derek, because I know we do want to talk about the new season and what players are actually going to be experiencing in this PTR. Again, just to redefine what PTR is for some people, because I got messages from people going like, well, PTRs are sometimes buggy, and I'm like, well, it's a PTR, so it is like a beta or an alpha, an early look
65,
into
czyli
the
o
game,
10
so we
leveli
expect
przesuwają.
that.
O
There will be like
kurwa,
known
to
issues,
nic
and
nie
we'll actually
zmieni.
have those known issues on our forums, so people can actually see them. You can report bugs. It actually helps when you guys actually jump into a PTR and experience it, and give us feedback, because that helps tweak the start of the season.
Będę musiał zerknąć na ten sezon Epoka właśnie.
But with season 8, we will be having, of course, a PTR, and we'll be talking about it here in a second. And if you remember with season 7, we kind of had this like this overarching theme with like big changes in that season. One was specifically around what was mostly focused around like
Po
the
campfire'ze
whispers.
można zerknąć, no.
And of course, with season 8, we have another overarching theme that we're really going to be talking about, where we'll be kind of even seeing an old friend. So Derek, do you want to chat about it here?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Old friend.
So yeah, as you mentioned, seasons are kind of like our opportunity to shine focus on an existing system and really amplify or celebrate or enhance it within that respective season. So we've seen that with season 4 with the Helltide revamps and whatnot. As you mentioned, season 7 was the emphasis on the Tree of Whispers and Bounties. So as Colin kind of mapped out the journey to the endgame, we wanted to shine focus on a major endgame feature, namely surrounding our bosses. And we have a lot of really cool bosses in the world of Sanctuary. But more specifically, the lair boss system, or as some of us, and we reference it to as the boss ladder. So
O!
focus is on
Nowi
the lair
bossowie,
boss
nowe
system.
mechaniki,
We're going to be
Collectible,
doing a whole mess of new things to it. So
Tylko
we're
zróbcie
adding
tak,
new
żeby
bosses,
ci bossowie nie byli
new
zawsze na tych
mechanics,
samych jebanych
quality
arenach,
life
kurwa, kwadratowych.
updates, and a revamped materials loop that I'm going to be covering throughout the course of the segment. So, first I just want to kind of talk about, the new bosses and additions to the roster. So when we're talking about the lair bosses, these are like the biggest, baddest, bosses of Sanctuary. So we're looking at how do we add to the roster in a meaningful way, but also which bosses do we add that are impactful and versatile enough to carry the entire theme of a season? So
Fajnie by
with that in
było.
mind, we're just asking ourselves a question of which are the right bosses to bring. You mentioned an old
Gdyby te
friend.
bossy
So we
się
had to choose something that was
respiły
versatile. We had to choose something that was big.
w różnych scenariuszach.
So that's where we go to Belial. Yes. season
O,
8, Belial
kurwa,
returns.
dzień
Belial's
dobry.
back in Sanctuary. He is climbing his way
Wygląda
to the
tak samo
top of
chujowo
the
jak
lair
w
boss
trójce.
ladder. He is the
Ej,
new,
Diablo 3, faktycznie.
exalted pinnacle challenge within the ladder. He is the highest challenge, the highest reward.
O,
And he also has
najwyższy.
some very unique reward
On będzie silniejszy od
tricks
Lilith?
up his sleeve that I'll
A nie,
cover a little
Lilith
bit
nie
later.
jest w
So
tym,
for
w
now,
drabince.
just know that Belial's back, and he's also just not joining the party alone. He's bringing a couple of friends from our
A z Modana
Vessel of
jeszcze.
Hatred. So first up is our buddy Urvar.
O,
so
to była
Urvar's
fajna walka.
joining the roster of the lair boss ladder system. He's going to be filling out kind of like the lowest rung of the ladder. So he's going to be joining the party with the Varshans and the Beast
Okay.
of Nice and whatnot. So Urvar's back, and we're also bringing back another Vessel of Hatred character.
O, to była
the
fajna
Harbinger of
walka.
So happy for this.
Yeah, no, this
Tylko, że
one-
będziemy ich
We're going to
one-shotować,
see a little bit more
kurwa.
of this guy in just a little bit, but the Harbinger of Hatred will be joining kind of the second rung of the ladder with the likes of Duriel and Andariel. And one thing I just do want to stress is that
O,
both
z
these
Durielem i
Vessel
Andariel.
of Hatred
No,
bosses
ciekawe.
will dip into the shared loot pools of other bosses within their respective tier, but also
Tylko oczywiście
have
mam z tym jeden
some,
problem.
additional bonuses that is specific to the Vessel of Hatred, like being a great source of tributes and runes. But Belial, for all intents and purposes, is available to everyone, and he is just the new pinnacle challenge of the boss ladder.
So you're saying even harder than Duriel and Andariel right now. He's going to be harder, more rewarding than even
Wszystko by
those.
było
Absolutely.
spoko,
Yeah.
gdyby
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
nie
Top tier.
skalowały się
Yeah.
z poziomu
Top tier.
trudności,
Belial
tylko
Lord
gdyby
of
miały
Light is
swój
not
poziom
And I'm really
trudności.
excited about this because I think this is going to pair really well with the sort of
A ja jestem w
leveling
szoku,
journey and
że
the
dodali
torment progression
nowego
where we can do
bossa,
a little bit more
a nie wzięli
aspirational, a
Astarota,
little bit more
dali tam.
challenging.
I
It's really
zastanawiam
like
się,
a
co
return
jest
to
za
the
problem
heart of
dać
the
tam tego
Diablo
Astarota.
experience, right? Sort of leveling from nothing and taking on these huge
Ale
big
bawię.
bads to claim their loot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's kind of like the inherent cool thing about the lair boss ladder system is that you start with like the initiate level floor, you take those on, you graduate to the next level,
Ja wam
and
powiem,
then now
dlaczego
you have
Astarot nie
kind of
wchodzi.
Belial just always there looming over you.
Yeah.
As kind of like the aspirational, yes, I get to go fight him now. But for those who know about our buddy Belial, Lord of Lies, you know that he kind of appears in different forms. So this is what we're kind of referencing as like his supreme form that appears at the top of the lair boss ladder.
O, czyli najpierw będzie innym
But
bossem.
he also has his, I guess, smaller, more agile, compact form. I like to affectionately refer to him as Baby Belial, but
Oh.
this is Belial in his more compact form. And throughout the course of the season, or I guess just the lair boss mechanics, he's going to be popping up all over the place. But I'm really excited about this version of Belial's new role in the lair boss ladder system in the sense that defeating and looting any of the lair bosses has a small percent chance to initiate a surprise ambush from Belial himself. And this is really cool because this is kind of like a two for the price of one payout. So let's say I fight Andariel, I defeat Andariel, I loot Andariel, and I get this special ambush triggered. And if I defeat Belial, I'll get a double payout of Andariel's loot. So I got the loot from Andariel, and I get another payout of Andariel's loot from defeating Belial himself. So
That's huge.
it's a really exciting kind of just like injection of some fun novel mechanics within the lair boss system that we're doing over and over and over again. So again, really excited about this update. And again,
Znowu,
in the spirit of teasing
można by to
kind
było
of
zrobić
the
bardzo
rewards
fajnie, bo to jest fajny
relationship
pomysł,
and,
który podali,
connection that
tylko
Belial has.
egzekucja będzie pewnie
This
chujowa.
version of Belial has a very special connection to his larger supreme form in the lair boss ladder that I'll touch upon a little bit later. A lot of teasing that I'm kind of just setting up. There's a lot to go over.
We're going to lie to everybody.
Yeah,
We're
just
gonna-
kidding. Yeah, we're like,
That's
yeah.
part of the theme.
Belial's actually not here. This is a lie. Yeah. Yeah. So that was that. That was the the Belial ambushes. But I also want to talk about some additional major sweeping updates that's coming in with just the system as a whole. And I want to talk about the summoning materials. As we know, the way that the system currently functions
Konrad,
is you
witam.
do activities, you get summoning items, you go visit
Dobra,
the boss, and then
pokażcie,
you
o co
plop them
chodzi.
in, you summon the boss, and then that's kind of just a flow. So when we're looking at the lair boss system, we don't just look about ways that we can add to it. We also look about opportunities to
Jak wam się podobają nowe
resolve or
tapetki
do
na
some
kanale?
frictions or just areas for improvement that
Te
we
trzy
can have
nowe.
with it, since it's a very mature system.
Mam
we get a
pomysł
lot
na,
of
na
feedback that we,
tapetkę o tym Peterze.
diligently ingest
Taki
and
wielki
talk
napis
about
i
and whatnot on our team.
ogromne zmiany,
So when it
a
came to
mały,
the
które
summoning
chuja
materials,
zmienią.
we identified a couple of key points of,
Cześć,
I guess,
Chris.
friction that players
Tak,
are currently
nowe
having with
bossy.
it. One is, since you have to ante up your summoning materials just to summon the boss, it's kind of a feels bad moment when you realize that you just wasted, X number of materials to find out that you can't defeat Duriel. Like, okay, that's wasted materials, back to the loop. Maybe I'll fight him another week or two, depending how fast you are. And it's just generally not a great feeling for myself or for players and whatnot.
Yeah, I definitely have run into this where it's like, I'm only going to fight the boss when I can guaranteed win against it.
Right.
Right. So you never actually.
And how do you know that too until
how do you know?
trial and error?
Like you never really have that like actual fun fight with the boss where you're like, oh, am I gonna lose or not? Because it's like, well, I'm just not gonna risk it.
Co oni
I've
kurwa
had
chcą
times where I'm
zrobić?
like, I don't know if my build's quite ready, so I'll try to fight a boss. And then like,
Co oni,
this
kurwa,
is really
chcą
tough.
zrobić?
Like, I die a couple times and I'm like,
Czy
do I
oni
really
chcą
wanna
zrobić
keep,
to, że jak nie
like,
pokonamy
retrying
bossa,
it?
to dostajemy
Because,
z
like,
powrotem
well, I'm already
materiały?
invested. I'm kinda like,
To
I'm
jest
kind of
kurwa
committed.
casual
So with
overload.
this new way, I don't need to invest those right up front. I can just go and fight them right away and see how strong I am without risking the materials.
Yeah. So we're going to cover like the specificities of the new system and how it all works in a little bit. But the other kind of pain point that we identified with the current system is also just in regards to like the party play. I think my little earpiece is coming out of my ear. There you go. Now
It's a
back in there.
common theme on this.
Yeah.
The earpiece just pops out all the time.
We do it live here. So the other element is like just the party play, right?
Yeah.
And as much as we want to kind of like entrust in our fellow man and whatnot and engage in the boss rotations and whatnot, we have seen, some areas of friction where certain players don't engage in the boss rotations and they don't submit their materials. Like no one watching the stream would ever be guilty of this, but that does happen. It's shocking, but it does happen.
Belial is on the other side
Yeah.
of the computer.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll definitely pay the next rotation.
And then they leave and they take all their stuff. So that was another kind of area of friction that we experienced with the current summoning materials. So I think that's kind of enough of a preface just to set the tone for where the system is going now that we're introducing Season 8. So
So what are we doing?
I don't know. Let's find out. All right,
O
so
kurwa.
lair keys. So summoning materials are effectively being repurposed in their roles as a new item called lair keys. And what lair keys do, well, I'll just start with this, is since there's no more summoning materials, that just means that effectively all lair bosses are free to summon.
Yeah.
So if you're not sure if you're ready to take on a Varshan or a Duriel, just go visit them. Kind of use them as a bit of a training dummy to see if you can actually, take them on. But what lair keys now do is they grant access to the defeated boss's hoard or their treasure chest that they drop. So now I'll just walk you through kind of the new flow. Imagine this with me. So you enter Duriel's lair. You walk up to his altar and you just click the altar to summon him. Again, no cost to you. You fight Duriel, you defeat him, out pops his hoard, and now the Shards of Agony, which is now the lair key, you use that to open his hoard and get all the oodles of loot that you went to go visit him to do.
Yeah.
O
And these look like
kurwa,
comfort chests. So
serio?
you have to pay in order to get the loot, and the only loot the loot comes from the
Ale
person
to
who-
jest
Yeah, that's a
spierdolony
very
pomysł.
important distinction is that now
Oh,
every member in the party needs to have the appropriate type and quantity of the lair keys to access the loot in the hoard.
And you can still trade your keys
Ale
with
to jest
friends and things
kurwa,
like that. If
ja
you have
jebie.
9999, Duriel mats, you can split them in half and give them to your buddies to open the chest.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharing is
Babaś,
caring in this system. here.
streszczę ci.
And then of course, if you're really lucky, you'll get a Belial ambush and you can get double loot.
Idziesz na
Yeah,
bossa,
there you
który
go.
teraz nic nie
So,
kosztuje.
a lot
A
of
płacisz
new
tylko
avenues
za
and ways
otwarcie
to kind of,
skrzynki z niego, jak go zabijesz.
experience the system. So we also have the Stygian Stones. So Stygian Stones in Season 8 is living a new
Kurwa, jeden
life
z
now, in the
niewielu
sense that we wanted
ekscytujących
to
momentów sezonu
ensure that
wyjebali.
every boss in the first rung of the ladder, our initiate lair bosses, the Varshans, Grigors, Bisonites, Lord Zirs, and Uruvars now, that they're all equally relevant to getting you to climb to the next rung. So in addition to, you can take a screenshot of this chart here. I won't try and walk through the entire thing, but now Stygian Stones is a drop that can drop from any of the initiate lair boss tier here. And you can crush them into your lair key of choice for the second rung of the lair bosses. So let's say I fight Grigor, I get a Stygian Stone, and I want to go fight Andariel. I can just crush that into some Andariel keys. And again, just giving a little bit more flexibility in how players actually engage and progress through the lair boss ladder. again, as we know, all roads lead to Belial, Lord of Lies, the top of the pinnacle of the ladder at the end. Ooh, there's a lot. All right, final thing here is the item bloat reduction. So again, with this new system, we're consolidating all the lair keys to one lair key type per boss. So no more kind of managing 2 different materials and so I have enough material, I have 2 of these, 5 of these. It's just 1 material per boss. We're increasing the item stacking of these to 99, again, to cut down on some of that bloat. And one of my personal favorites here is that we're also normalizing the counts of required lair keys per boss rank. So all the initiate tiered bosses, they require the same quantity of their respective keys. So too the degraders and whatnot. So again, it's just cutting down on the total mental math and memory that is kind of affecting the, I guess, like on-ramping enjoyment of the current system.
Yeah, and Dario only needs 1 material, for example, as part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see in this chart here, Pincushion Doll, Shard of Agony, or the Stygian Stone is kind of the wild card that you can crush to any one of them. So
Tutaj trochę namieszali,
Dario
bo
needed 4 Pincushion Dolls. You have 3 of them, but you have
Nie wiem,
1
czy dobrze
Stygian Stone. You
zrozumiałem.
can crush that into a Pincushion Doll and go get Endario's Horde. So, all right, that was a pretty big overview and a lot of talking in charts, but I want to take the time to throw it over to Ruben and behind the scenes here and kind of just get into just what this all looks like as part of this in-game flow.
O właśnie, pokażcie.
Hello, Derek. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Teraz
Awesome.
lepiej będzie
Yeah,
to
let me
można
open up the
skumać.
menu
Ale
for
to
you.
będzie...
All right, cool.
To będzie
So in this
chujowe.
walkthrough, I'm just going to show you
Kurwa, jak ja dawno
we're
Diablo
going to
4
show
nie
you
widziałem.
rather the new flow to access the lair bosses with a little bit of a sneak peek of the Harbinger of Hatred. So one thing I want to just call out real quick is kind of some of the quality of life updates that we've taken to just the map presentation and the boss dungeon tooltips themselves. And I'll kind of just go through these kind of an itemized order. So first, all of the boss dungeon map icons have been given a little bit of a beautification treatment. So they're a little bit more bold, red, and easier to identify against the sea of other icons on the map. But now I want to talk about the
Operation Incursion. Patrzcie, jakieś nowe aktywność
So
sezonowe.
the first quality of life update that we added was just simply printing the name of the boss that resides within the dungeon. One of the kind of ambiguities that we had with the previous version of this system was not knowing specifically which boss lives in which dungeon. Like, oh, who does live in the Gaping Crevice or who lives in the Malignant Tunnels? So now you can see here that the Harbinger of Hatred lives in the Harbinger's Den. This is probably not the best example because who else would live in the Harbinger's Den? He technically does live in every single one of them.
You don't know where he's at.
But yeah, so you can see here now we print the name of the lair boss that lives in the dungeon for a little bit easier find. Inside of the main body description, we also just give a little bit more guidance and information on what the value of defeating this boss is and directing players to the fact that they are a source of ancestral and mythic unique items. The last 2 updates here are some of my favorites of this is that we also display now the required items that you need to access the lair boss's horde. If you recall the previous iteration, that was not apparent to you, so you would kind of like waste the time traveling to the boss just to find out that, oh, I have 3 or 4 Abhorrence Hearts, so I can't fight the boss yet. So we wanted to, again, just smoothen out the access and onboarding to the feature. And I think my absolute favorite update of all this is you see at the bottom, we now have the ability to travel directly into the dungeon directly from the map.
Nice.
So again, no more teleporting to the nearest waypoint. We just pop directly in and just get into it.
Moim zdaniem, waszym pewnie nie, ale moim tak.
We've been loading into here, and I think this is a great time to just outline. I've talked about the new bosses. I've talked about new mechanics. But we have a collection of really great existing lair bosses. And one thing that we wanted to take as an opportunity within the season was to also enhance every other lair boss that exists within the system. So every lair boss is getting a bit of a difficulty spike and new mechanics to, again, freshen up the fights that we've been knowing and love. So if you fought the Varshans or the Duriels or even the Liliths over and over and over again, all this is in the PTR, so definitely worth checking them out again to see what's changed and how much different their experience is.
Yeah, Duriel has some messed up surprises. for
Yeah.
you.
Duriel eats you.
Why did you spoil it? It's definitely worth
Duriel
checking out the
will destroy
mechanics.
you.
But
Nowe
again,
mechaniki
so this
mają
is the
bossy,
Harbinger of
no,
Hatred.
ciekawe.
And just as a reminder, one thing that we do when we add a boss to the lair boss system is we don't just take the carbon copy, campaign version of it. We also take the opportunity to inject some really crazy mechanics. So I don't necessarily want to, kind of spoil the surprises of the Harbinger of Hatred's mechanics here, but he does get pretty wild.
He does.
This is a spectacle and a half
Yeah,
of a
it's very
fight,
cool.
and I'm really
No, to
excited
kurwa może
to
być
have
naprawdę
players check
spoko.
it out. So
Na początku sezonu.
yeah, and I think this is about all we might want to show of this guy.
Yeah, we probably won't go into it. We don't want to spoil all the mechanics and everything. Even though we're kind of also spoiling a little bit of like a rogue build.
Keen-eyed amongst you might have noticed some interesting things on Rogue, which I'll get to in a bit.
It's spoil or it's teasing to maintain
Exactly.
truth.
Teasing. That's the
Teasing
purpose.
everyone along.
Co tam było? Bo nie zwróciłem uwagi.
But yeah, so now that was a sneak peek at the Harbinger of Hatred we just talked about again. In case you missed it, all lair bosses are getting a boost in both their performance and just the mechanics that they have.
Yep.
But let's, we fast forwarded past, the Harbinger of Hatred's fight. So let's imagine a world that, we fought through the whole thing, we killed him, and let's show off now what to expect from the Horde loot flow. So we have some footage here with this very shiny chest.
Very shiny chest.
So we have 4 abhorrence hearts, and now we can open up the chest. Again, each one of us needs to have it. And I mentioned that Belial has a chance to surprise ambush you after opening any horde. And here you go. Look at this. So this is meant to be a relatively rare occurrence, but this is the magic of pre-recorded footage. We can make the impossible happen. And in this case, again,
Spectral
painting the
Ash.
full picture of the scenario, you defeated the Harbinger of Hatred, you got the Horde, you
Nie, nie
opened
wymagają,
it, you got
Szymon.
baby Belial, you killed him, and now you get another
Double
proc
the loot,
of, double the loot, double the fun.
Yeah, double the loot of what you just essentially got. Which is
With the one-time payment of the lair keys that you deposited. So it really is, kind of a 2-for-1 sale that Belial has for you.
And if you noticed, you might have seen we did keep a bonus for party play. So while you do have to pay to get the chest and open up the horde, we kept a bonus chance for loot. So we love that people enjoy fighting the bosses as parties, and we know that that's a fun social experience in Diablo. So what we've done is the hordes themselves will have bonus chances for loot when you are in a party. And that does scale with party members.
Yep, no, absolutely. So
Tak, z
a
Belialem
lot of
będziemy
loot
walczyć.
everywhere to give.
Będzie
And
silniejszy od
on
Duriela
the
i
topic
Andariela.
at the very top, I teased that Belial had a very special kind of role in the reward structure, different from every other boss. So defeating the ambush version of Belial is not just lucrative in the sense that it's a double payout. He is also the sole source of the lair keys that you need to access his supreme form at the top of the ladder, the supreme form's horde. So
To by
I wanna
można
show
było
off
naprawdę
now
fajnie zrobić.
the Supreme
To by można było
Belial's
fajnie
very
zrobić, ale ja
green,
już widzę, że to jest
chest
chujowe.
here. So you can see here, it doesn't open up right away. I have some options. So the really cool thing about the Supreme Belial's horde is that you can set it to mimic the reward drops of any other existing lair boss. So let's say if you are trying to do Duriel runs to get the special stuff that he has, and you can set your Belial to drop the Duriel loot, and he will do so at an enhanced rate. So it's even better than if you just went to go fight Duriel specifically.
Yeah, so if you're really targeted farming those specific uniques, you get,
Czyli nie masz swojego zajebistego lootu, tylko wybierasz sobie loot od jakiegoś
much
flepa.
better chance of doing that as well.
Kurwa dojebany.
Absolutely. And not just that in terms of like his value, he also
będzie.
guarantees one ancestral unique drop.
Stream
per
przedłużany
kill.
nawet do
And
rana.
He's also a really great
Chuj, że
source
mam na rano
of
do
the
roboty.
infernal compasses. So if you want to empower your infernal horde runs and whatnot, it's never a waste of time to go visit the Belial Supreme at the top of the ladder here.
Yeah, and this is in Torment 2, and it all scales with Torment. So
Exactly.
the higher
Yeah.
the Torment, the
Yeah,
more
we're
loot you'll get.
what we're seeing in this footage is just Torment 2. So obviously, like Torment 4, you would get more loot out of it because it's a much more difficult challenge. At Torment
is much
4.
To jest
Yes.
problem
It
tych
scales
bossów,
with the
że są
torment tiers, and also
powiązani
if
z
we were in a
tormentem, a
party
nie
in this
mają
example
swojego
here, we get
poziomu
even
trudności.
more chances
Mogliby
of
być
great
po
stuff
prostu
out of it as
powyżej
well.
tormentu czwartego i koniec, nie?
All right,
Albo że
cool.
na
Well,
tormencie
that
czwartym
is
dopiero możesz
the
tam
lair
iść.
key and the lair boss. I'm just have a lot of things to cover here.
Yeah, you have I know we want to talk a little bit about kind
Ale
of
by to było.
It's funny because people saw it as Ruben was on the map because they probably saw a term like with apparitions and everything.
Right, yeah, there's a lot of teasing in this.
I know, a lot of teasing. This is what
not
happens when
planned.
you use a live build and everything's fine.
Yeah, it's exciting. But one thing before we hop into the next thing, I do want to reestablish so that everything that we just talked about as far as what we're introducing to the lair boss system and all the mechanics, new bosses and whatnot, that is permanent. That is just how the system works now. So everything is getting introduced in Season 8, but it's not leaving beyond Season 8. It is just there.
It'll be an eternal also.
It will, yeah, it'll be an eternal. That's just how the system works. What the next segment, though, is all the seasonal specific stuff. So again, as Adam mentioned, you might have seen some apparition incursion things pop up. So let's get into the first kind of seasonal related content here. Oh, the top says lair boss. Okay. Anyways, we do it live. Apparition incursions. Apparition Incursions is a new open world seasonal event to empower your leveling journeys and also kind of just spread the narrative and dramas of
Wiedziałem, że w tym się będzie
Belial is
Belial
back on
podawał.
Sanctuary and he's spreading his own sense of twisted realities across the land.
sumie fajnie,
He's
jakby
always in
ktoś
his effort to
chociaż
try and
kawałek
plunge
tego
the world of
przykład
Sanctuary into his realm of
campfire.
lies.
A to już
And
jest
he's
ten
doing
podcast?
it through this fast-paced boss rush
Tylko, że ja
style
chuja
event
wiem
that kind
o
of takes the
Lasepoku.
spirit of the open world social boss play of the Blood Maiden and making a really cool kind of just really fast-paced
drugiej?
bam bam
Kurwa, ja mam
bam
na
boss
rano do
rush style
pracy,
event.
panowie.
So I think we have some footage here just to put some some visuals to it. So this is an area
Ale
of the world that
ja
Belial's
pierdolę.
apparitions are kind of overtaking.
Gdzie mam nadzieję, że
And throughout the course, players are
to
going to be
jest-
defeating these apparitions to draw out up to 2 of his apparition bosses. This is pulled from
Czyli
a total
kolejni.
of 10 potential apparition bosses. So each time you go through this, you'll fight 2 of them kind of
Kolejne
randomized.
klony postaci
So
naszej,
each time
tak?
should be a little bit different. And all of this is leading up to a showdown against Belial himself. So again, it's celebrating bosses. It's 3 bosses per event. And the idea for this is that they're up pretty much 24/7. So we want to just encourage that, hop on the boss train, ride it to the end, find the next one, and just, go to your heart's content. And, celebration of bosses this season, really.
Absolutely. And what do you get for killing those bosses?
Ooh, you're going to get some cool stuff, Colin. Let's go to the next slide.
Ja pierdolę.
That kind of leads us into the collectible boss powers, or seasonal powers. Spoiled it right there.
I mean, it's already on the slide.
It's already on the slide, yeah.
You're fine.
So the theme for the powers theme for season 8 is boss powers. So Belial being kind of like the illusionary character he is, mimicry and whatnot. In season 8, players will be acquiring the ability to steal and mimic the powers of up to 24 targeted bosses across Sanctuary. So we have 24 collectible powers that are gathered from the first time kill of targeted bosses across the full content from level 1 till the very top. So you asked about, what do the apparition bosses give you? They're, aside from the loot and all that stuff, they're also your first source of your first 10 boss powers that make up the magic tiers. You can kind of see in this little chart here. Graduating from the apparition bosses, you now go into the world bosses. So each one of our 3
wam
world bosses
pokażę.
have a power associated with
Ja-
them.
wiecie, jak ja robię
And so
tapetki?
too do each of our lair bosses.
Mam gotową
capped off
taką
with
graficzkę,
Lilith
nie?
with her own boss power that you can acquire.
Like a ladder in the
I
boss.
usuwam
And so, yeah, it's definitely
to.
celebrating the
wpierdalam
progression journey of
nowy
bosses
obrazek,
from
nie?
the moment you log in to
Ba.
the moment that you're powerful enough to take down Lilith.
Proste, nie?
Belial, Belial
Blizzard
is
tak
kind of
samo
like
robi
the
z nowymi
star of the season.
sezonami, nie?
He's special, he gets
Bierze
2
to,
powers, 'cause
nie?
that's just how he rolls.
I wpierdala.
Yeah,
O,
and
mamy nowy
I
system!
think, one of the cool things about this kind of structure, it's a very
Potem
structured
bierze-
power climb, so little ambiguity of like, how do I get the Wandering Death's power? Well, go find
Potem
and kill
bierze i
him.
tak robi, nie?
It's just that nice little
Sezon
structured
5.
journey that
Nowe
kind of a nice
moce!
little stamp collection just to reward each kind of a tier of
Tego nie
progression that you
widzieliście, ale
make
czekajcie,
across your,
zobaczcie, co mamy na
leveling
następny
and
sezon.
journeys. But that's not just the coolest part of it, in my opinion here, is that it's also just how the powers work this
Co powiecie
season.
na
So
to?
you can see that we have 4 slots, the top slot and 3 little kind of like supporting slots. So the really cool thing is that each one of these powers have 2 sides to them that activate depending on which power slot you put them in.
Dobrze, babać,
So you
odczejmy.
can have up to one main, one power. You can have up to 1 power slot into your main power slots, or you can have up to 3 powers slotted into your modifier slots. And I just want to dive into this Wandering Death's chest beam example here. So if I were to slot the Wandering Death's power into the main power slot, I would actually unlock the full representation of his iconic chest beam power. So the main powers is activating and unlocking the actual iconic power that is representative of the boss. We're going to show kind of a little bit of a showcase after this, but that's how that respective area of the power system works. The modifier slots, though, are cool and powerful in their own right, though. So let's say I don't necessarily need the Wandering Death's main power for whatever utility purposes. I can still get value out of the fact that I own it by slotting it into the modifier slots, which activates kind of like the side B of it, which is more of a supporting thing. So in this case, it's your main power. Now it empowers your main power to instantly execute non-boss enemies, when they're within a certain threshold of life. So it's not just 24 ways to kind of express your sense of power this season. It's 48 because each of these powers have
bardzo dziękuję.
Like build your own boss power.
Essentially,
Twoje
it's a lot of fun
zdróweczko.
just kind of like mix match slot around and
okrągło
see,
się trafiło.
what kind
Pozdrawiam.
of a concoction you come up with, and that's something that I'm particularly interested in going to the PTRs. Like,
Nie,
what are some
ogólnie
of the favorite combinations?
Nie jest zły ten
Or,
campfire, tylko
ideally,
na
what are the
każdy
favorite combinations based
fajny
off of the
pomysł
circumstance that you're going into?
przypominamy sobie, że zrobią pewnie to
One
chujowo, a
thing I
potem
want to-
dokładają
that I'm
jakimś
really
zjebanym
excited about this
rozwiązaniem.
system is, in previous seasonal power systems, we sometimes found as you got really high, Paragon levels, your build is like super powerful. The relative impact of some of the seasonal powers was a little lower. They didn't really scale with you as well as we really wanted to. We've done an update in this season where these boss powers are going to scale with your Paragon level as you're leveling up, and so they actually are going to get more powerful as you get more powerful. Right. So the exact number that you as soon as you unlock it, maybe is not the most powerful thing, but as you're powering up, it's still going to be relevant to your build at every stage of your progression.
Yeah, it's really good. And I like the fact that the powers don't kind of just live on their own little island. Like they get ingrained into the other systems that we're engaging with. So that's a high level of the boss powers for season 8. And I want to toss it back to Ruben for just kind of a little bit of a live showcase of them.
Hey, Derek, thanks for all that. That was great, man.
Yeah, I'm excited. What do you got for us?
I'm excited.
Well, I get the fun
blood.
job of showcasing all these powers today, but I must confess, I got my smoothie, so I'm a little jacked up today. So I'll try
I'm so
not to.
happy. I'm so happy you got your smoothie. So happy
it was
for
tasty.
you.
I'll try not to talk too
I'm
fast.
thrilled. I'm thrilled.
Let's go ahead and open
Kurwa,
up
te korporacyjne
our
żarty
inventory
są po
here.
prostu
And you'll
tak
notice on the left
dojebane.
side, a familiar tab is our
Ale
seasonal
ładnie
tab,
teraz
which
to
is boss
wygląda.
powers. So from this tab is where you'll be kind of interacting with your powers throughout the season. Like Derek mentioned, you can drag and drop them, equip them
przynajmniej
on the
animacja
fly.
jest
There's no
ładna. Hej.
penalty. I think the team and everybody wants you to experiment and have fun with the builds. You can also upgrade them by hovering over them. There's a corresponding button here. On PC, it's F, so you go ahead and push that to upgrade them. And yeah, so the top slot is your main slot, like Derek mentioned. This is where your main powers go, and all the bottom ones are your modifier slots. So right here, Derek's favorite was the Wandering Death's chest beam. So as a modifier, right, you can execute enemies, but as soon as you drag it over here, boom, now it's a channeled ability. And you'll notice right away, it's a prominent beam.
Ale to
Yeah, it works well
chujowo
with channeled
wygląda.
abilities. It only works with channeled abilities, actually. And it's kind of cool with Dance of Knives because you can adjust and do these micro adjustments to kind of maximize the effect on your target, just to keep it on them a little bit longer.
Ktoś się nie postarał.
Yeah, and as you can kind of tell, we're not necessarily going for subtlety in terms of the expression of these powers this season.
I'm dying. Someone in chat's like, Goku? Oh my god.
I
sensie-
guess we'll call it real quick. Just one thing I absolutely love is just the animations of the UI.
Co ty
itself,
pierdolisz,
and,
że Lilith
you
będzie
slot these
napierdalać
little like
skillami.
eyeball powers into the little eye sockets, and it blinks, and it's just kind of just fun across the board, just engaging with
Squelches
this.
and pops.
Yeah. So what do we got next?
The next one I want to showcase is Lilith's Wind of Hate, just because probably most of us have died to this before, her spike ability from the ground. And it works on almost every skill. So you can see as soon as I dash here, I get the spikes. With Barrage, you get the spikes. So you can slot it in almost every build and have fun with it. Even Dance of Knives, really cool ability there. Let's see what
A
else
on
we
jest
got.
zamrożony, bo jest
Another
taki
fun
wypad,
one,
tak?
there's a transformative ability, is Juriel's Burrow. So it completely changes your evade skill. and you burrow underground. You deal damage when you go into the ground and when you exit. But the real cool thing is you become immune while underground, and you can control the direction.
O,
Is
to
awesome.
That's
awesome.
one of my absolute favorite. I love that one.
Ej,
You can stand still if you like, or whatever, and it scales as you get more evade charges.
Ej,
you
to
get
akurat
more
spoko.
burrows. So I'm sure there's a lot of, especially adding 3 new bosses with all kinds of crazy effects. You know, you can now dodge them a little bit easier, which is great.
Tak,
So
postać
there's
ma
some
skille
good use
bossów, no.
cases for that.
Yeah, and even just right there, I want to just chime in and just say that, you know, we showed off a power that procs off of the evade. We showed one that procs off channeling and one that procs off any skills. Like one of the goals going into the design of these powers was to just remove any ambiguity about how do I actually proc it. We wanted to make it as utility focused and straightforward as possible so that players can really easily digest and how they work it into their builds.
Yeah, that's a great point. Urvar's bombs is probably my personal favorite, as I like making builds and interesting builds. This definitely supports ultimate builds. And as you can see on the screen here, it lowers your cooldown by 5 seconds, which is great, and gives you a nice damage component to kind of top off on it. So we're playing Rogue, and Death Trap is an ultimate ability. So as soon as I pop it, you'll see Urvar's bombs kind of shoot out, and you get that lower cooldown effect as well. So it's great.
And you get 2 death traps. I wonder how he's doing that.
how you got so
That's on me. That's on me, guys. Yeah, all the teasing on this stream. And finally, before they play the walk-off music, I think I could showcase. Let's do Grigor's Lightning Square. So Lilith skill had like a slight cooldown. This one scales with your build really well. So the more you can cast core skills, the more you get these iconic kind of lightning strike panels shoot out from your character. So you can imagine, you can just
Ale
go full
chujowo.
Thunder God here
W
the
sensie,
whole time.
okej,
with your
spoko,
builds. So,
jakby nie było tych
yeah, I think that's
kwadratów
all
na
I can
ziemi,
showcase
jak
today.
skurwa
But I
z
appreciate the
D&D.
time.
No, thank you. That was awesome. Yeah, so again, those are just like a kind of a sneak peek at just a handful of
Radek,
powers.
dzień dobry.
Again, throughout the course of the PTR, you'll get to experiment and engage with all of them. And again, looking forward to the feedback and just just general notes of how you incorporate into your builds and what really excites you. So I think that's pretty much
dobry,
the wrap
Radku.
up for all the content coming in Season 8 that persists beyond and within.
All the Season 8 stuff that will be available in PTR for players to actually jump into. We're still going to be talking about a few more things as we get closer to Season 8 with the launch of the actual season itself. So, Derek, thank you so much for walking us through everything. And of course, with a new season and a new PTR, we have a lot of changes that are coming to classes. Specifically,
O,
like the rogue.
najnudniejsze.
We saw someone doing that. Yeah,
We can just skip.
Yeah,
We'll just skip it. Yeah.
There's other classes to talk about.
So Charles over here is actually going to go
Yeah.
through all the class changes that players will be able to experience and test out during the PTR.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's tons of new bosses to fight, so how are you going to fight them, right? So let's talk about some class updates that are coming. First, I want to talk about some updates that are going to
Nie
affect
liczyłbym
all
na to.
classes in some way.
Nerwów.
These are kind of a bit more generic updates. So talking about ultimate scaling, this is something that we introduced in Season 7, the current live season, where as you get to rank 5 of the ultimate skills, some of them had mechanics that allowed you to crank up their damage by building different stats, right? So if you got more damage while fortified, then your blood wave is going to do more damage, for instance. We think that's really cool. It enabled a lot of very powerful builds, and so we're looking at ensuring that those don't like really eclipse every other option in the game. We still love that those are powerful builds. We love that you're playing them. We don't want them to be the
Cześć,
only
Soul
option.
Whisper, dzień dobry.
And so with that in mind, we're looking at putting a cap on that scaling. You can scale them up to 200% bonus damage, which is still a lot. You're still doing, like triple damage, but we just want to make sure it doesn't get completely out of control with all the new stats and some of the scaling coming in from some of the seasonal powers that could potentially lead those to be, crowding out other options of gameplay. Additionally, we're looking at
Teraz się staną
crowd
chujowe
control.
rzeczy.
This is something I talked about on our last campfire chat about how we're really looking at the moment-to-moment combat of our game. Like what are you doing like 1 second to the next? And one thing that came up a lot was sometimes enemies just randomly get crowd controlled. They randomly are frozen or stunned, and a lot of this comes from some of the what we call incidental crowd control, as in lucky hit crowd control effects, or anything that involves not like, oh, I pressed a button, now they're stunned, right? And we noticed like, hey, we got a lot of these effects across the game in many different places. And so we looked at really toning those down, specifically in the generic spaces. I know Fist of Fate is one of a very popular unique item right now for many reasons. One of them was that kind of free crowd control, but that's something that we think wasn't really promoting the best moment-to-moment combat and most engaging flow. So that particular affix has been changed to Lucky Hit Apply Vulnerable. But a lot of the other identity of Fist of Fate is still there as well. So it still has, wide ranges on things, it still does random damage, and a lot of lucky hit chance as well.
Yeah, and this change really puts the value of Frost Nova and Ground Stomp. It sort of makes those more valuable and satisfying.
Right, yeah. So if you really want to get those kind of crowd control effects, it's going to be a build choice. You're going to have to consciously do it, and you're going to like know when it's happening. It's not just, oh, they randomly got stunned, and if they didn't get stunned, maybe you got hit, and that never felt good when it was just kind of purely random.
Yeah.
Okay.
Additionally, this is something that the keen-eyed among you might have spied when we were looking at some earlier stuff. We've done a bit of a naming pass on some of the damage over time effects. This is no functional change, this is just a naming thing.
Dobra, to się
where we have things like
Shadow
physical
się nazywa
damage, and when it's physical damage over time, we call it bleeding. And when it's poison, we call it poisoning, for instance. We didn't previously have names for shadow, lightning, or cold damage over time. We would just call it like from shadow damage over time affected enemies, which was an absolute mouthful. So we've got new common terms. Shadow damage over time will be called corrupting damage. Lightning damage over time is shocking damage. And cold damage over time, which we saw with the Wandering Death chest beam, is called frostbite damage. So that's just a terminology thing. It still relates to those.
Moi
base
kochani,
damage
jak tu
types, same as
jesteście,
always.
mógłbym was poprosić
It's
o
just a
jedną
terminology
rzecz.
update.
Cleans up the tooltips.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, so let's get on to some of the actual class
Wrzuciłem
updates. Starting
3 filmy
alphabetically
ostatnio.
with the
Dalibyście radę
Barbarian.
tam pójść, dać łapkę
All
w
right,
górę,
so
albo
our
zostawić jakiś
focus on
komentarz.
Barbarian this season is about
Potrzebuję
primarily about
odbić
Barbarian's core fantasy of being physical and
troszeczkę
hitting enemies with a big weapon, right? In the past couple seasons,
jak
a
się
lot of the
nazywa
meta
to?
builds around Barbarian have focused around
Algorytm.
things like earthquakes or dust
Przez
devils,
miesiąc
which
nie
are really
wrzucałem
cool
filmu.
and fun, but I think they
No teraz mówią o
we
zmianach
got some
klasowych, to
feedback
mogę
that,
troszeczkę
hey, I don't really
popierdolić.
feel like
Przez miesiąc ponad nie wrzucałem filmu i teraz moje filmy osiągają po 100 wyświetleń. I algorytm to odebrał teraz tak, że jak wrzuciłem 3 filmy naraz, jeden po drugim, no to nie pokazują się one ludziom. Nie wiem, czy zauważyliście, ale są 3 nowe filmy na kanale i jeden nowy tylko dla wspierających, jak są tu wspierający. Możecie, nie mówię, żebyście oglądali, możecie sobie odpalić w jakimś tam okienku, bo tam mogą być rzeczy, które was nie interesują. Warhammer, ta strategia, czy właśnie ten Dragon Kin. Jakbyście weszli, zostawili komentarz, łapkę w górę. Jest was 100 osób na czacie teraz, podejrzewam, że z 20 to zrobi. Jak odpalicie sobie w innym oknie, na przykład, niech sobie ten film przeleci, na pewno mi to coś pomoże, nie? A wam to nic nie będzie szkodziło, a jestem na bardzo dobrej drodze, żeby mieć więcej czasu na te streamowanie i youtubowanie. Będzie coś z tego, z moją nową pracą? To są nowe unikaty, tak? Pracujemy przy grze cały czas. To znaczy ja pracuję przy grze, robimy grę, o tak. Cały czas przy niej pracujemy i powiem wam, że to jest najlepsze, co mnie na tym etapie mogło spotkać. Z zajebistymi ludźmi to robię, to po pierwsze. Spotkania nasze, a szczególnie ostatnie, 2 ostatnie, to jest po prostu coś, co ja bym chciał robić w życiu. Motywujące jest to, ale ja nie wysyłam żadnych CV-ek do różnych firm, że innych, po prostu cały czas się uczę. Cały czas się uczę. I uwielbiam ten proces, kocham ten proces. Dobra, co było na tej legendarce?
And so you're going to have to find some other way to kind of fill the gap in there, and you've got a new challenge for your build to overcome.
I'm hoping to see like Belial get decked by this.
I think it is possible that you're gonna melt some bosses with some really big hits.
It's a great finishing move.
Oh yeah. All right, let's take a look at
Bardzo
the
dziękuję.
Druid.
Jeżeli ktoś to zrobił, co powiedziałem, to bardzo, bardzo wam dziękuję.
One of the meta builds right now is revolves around Cataclysm and kind of snapshotting issues that come up with that. And so for those of you who don't know what snapshotting basically means is for Cataclysm, which is one of their ultimate skills that has a duration. So you press the button, it summons a storm around you that lasts for some amount of time. And if you get a lot of that cooldown reduction and you can cast Cataclysm a second time before the first one expires, currently on the live game, the second cast of Cataclysm will keep all of the bonuses and like bonus damage effects or guaranteed overpowers or whatever that was affecting the first one. And that was definitely not intended. That is not how we wanted that to work. We didn't want bonuses from one cast kind of instance to carry over to the next cast. Now this can only happen in situations where you get that lot of cooldown, but it was kind of promoting this gameplay where it's very feast or famine. If you successfully kind of snapshot all the buffs,
Bardzo dziękuję, Sagan.
Powerful. And if you mess it up or you don't get the snapshot quite right, you're actually really weak. And
Bardzo,
that
bardzo
led
dziękuję, Sagan.
to unintuitive gameplay.
Ja patrzę, kto pisze komentarze. O, jest Sagan na czacie. Bardzo dziękuję.
Between the best and the optimal and like kind of the average.
Bardzo, bardzo wam dziękuję.
So we're addressing that.
Tym, którzy to zrobili. Kto to nie zrobił?
Between two different cast snapshotting.
Yeah, we don't like snapshotting in general.
Right, yeah, the
W
kind of snapshotting where you are persisting things between different cast instances or equipping gear and then unequipping it to maintain a bonus. Those are snapshotting things that we don't think it promotes healthy gameplay. It's unintuitive in a lot of cases. You need to read a guide and follow an exact checklist to do it. That's not something that we think is good for the game. There are some cases where, with Cataclysm, giving the bonus to that whole that first time you cast it, you might say it's kind of snapshots for the duration of Cataclysm, but that's intended, where it says your next cast does something. That's what we want, but we don't want that to persist on to multiple casts or through basically infinitely. So that's one thing that we're adjusting on Druid. But we're also looking at promoting other playstyles as well. We think that build is fun, but there's other ways to play Druid as well. Specifically with Stone Burst, that's the Earth Core skill. It was kind of a channeled skill.
Piszę do Darkiana.
For a lot of our channeled skills, they are not allowed to overpower. But with Stone Burst particularly, we have reworked one of its legendary items to allow it to overpower when you detonate it at maximum size, which is really cool and opens up some new build possibilities for Stone Burst. And finally, I want to talk about the new unique Gathlin's Birthright. Let's take a look at it on screen here. It's in a similar vein to Tempest Roar and Vasilei's Prayer, where it is a unique helm that is very transformational. But rather than talking to werewolves or werebear builds, it's talking to human form builds. If you don't want to embrace the wilds quite as much, you want to stay in your human form, Gathlin's Birthright is going to be the unique helm for you. It says, while you're in human form, critically striking enemies with your nature magic skills will grant you Anima of the Forest for 10 seconds. And when whenever you gain Anima of the Forest, you are infused with bonus key passives, Perfect Storm and Earth and Might. So if you have this and you have another key passive, you could potentially have up to 3 key passives active at once, which is not something we've ever done before in Diablo 4.
That's nutty. And I love that it's on the helm. So if you really want to be a human druid, which historically, hasn't been as great as like werewolf, for example, this is the helm for you.
Yeah, this is exactly that. It's in a similar spot as like, hey, this is build defining in the way that Tempest Roar is.
Naiwek, dzięki.
We want this to be the build defining.
Sagan, dzięki znowu, bo widzę, że drugi komentarz już jest.
Additionally, aspect of Impending Deluge that empowers your Storm Strike, which is probably pretty useful with this human form nature magic build, which will cause your Storm Strike to deal more and also increase damage that they take from your other skills for a time. I think we've got a picture of this, or a video of this in action, where you've got your Druid, it's got you, you need 200 stacks of Anima of the Forest, which sounds like a lot, but it triggers on every hit. So in most combat situations, you actually stack it up pretty quick. And see, once you get this online, you're going to be empowered with Earth and Might, and with Perfect Storm, and with Nature's Fury. You have all this power.
And the idea of three passives going at once is the key passes is crazy.
Yeah.
Boss power slap.
Brzmi fajnie, nie?
Oh yeah, it is a lot when you get this empowered state.
No też właśnie oglądam.
All right, moving on to one of my favorite classes, the Necromancer. So Necromancer was probably the talk of the current season, season 7, with Bloodwave. I know we've mentioned it a few times on stream. Bloodwave.
Kurwa, do kina idę w niedzielę.
We've talked about how we're going to look at ultimate scaling, so maybe it won't scale up with the bonus damage, at least not to the same level that it had before. We're going to put a cap on that. We also just think we generally overshot the mark on the unique item, the Kasemi's Legacy, which really, like, you get this item and suddenly you're a god. It just had so much power in one spot. And we like a bit more of that progression that Colin was alluding to before about that 0 to hero journey. And when you have one item that is, you equip it and it's over, like you're as powerful as you ever need to be. That really shortcuts that journey and really makes it feel less satisfying than we want. So we're taking a look at reducing the power of that unique in particular, as well as some other adjustments to Bloodwave. We do want Bloodwave builds to still be powerful and still be an option if you like that playstyle. We just don't want it to be the S++ tier that it was in the past. Additionally, we're taking a look at Blood Lance. This is a core skill that has historically been very good in multi-target, kind of clearing out hit runs or dungeon situations, but then you run up into a boss.
Wygląda jak w Diablo 3 troszeczkę.
And it suddenly falls
I
really
wygląda
flat
jak
because
Diablo
its core
3.
mechanic is about like arcing damage between enemies, and if there's only one enemy, what are you doing here, right? So with this update to Bloodlands, it's going to still maintain some of that fantasy where it arcs the damage between enemies, but if you're hitting a target who's already lanced, it's going to do a massive amount more damage. So it's much better in single target situations and much more viable for bossing. And finally, the new legendary and unique for this season talks to minions. So let's take a look at Sanguivar, Blade of Zir, the unique two-handed sword. So this weapon will empower your summons, so your minions and your Army of the Dead, to affect enemies with Vampiric Curse. Now, for those of you who played back in Season 2, Vampiric Curse was a mechanic that we introduced in the Season of Blood, where you affect enemies with it, and as you kill them, you kind of collect their soul. And then you can unleash these souls. They kind of run out from you and explode, and it's really a satisfying moment. And we put that on a handful of legendary aspects, but now all of your summons will affect enemies with Vampiric Curse.
Oh.
And you can unleash them with Army of the Dead. And when you do that, the souls from Vampiric Curse
Dobra.
and Army of the Dead itself will deal massive
Ogólnie
increased
na pewno
damage,
będzie
staying
pogadanka z
with how many
Dartianem.
souls you've collected.
It's huge. I love Minion Necro.
Pytanie tylko kiedy.
Oh yeah. This is really cool.
Wam zespoileruję.
For Army of the Dead and Minion Necro.
Zauważyłem, że z
just really
Dartianem
do that
najbardziej
impactful
lubicie, jak
moment of
jest
summoning
jakaś pogadanka.
an army of
A mi się z nim
skeletons
super
to
gada też.
eviscerate the enemies. And additionally, aspect of service and sacrifice. I love playing with this one. This one feels so good to play. Your skeleton warriors explode on death, dealing a massive chunk of physical damage to surrounding enemies. And to help make sure they die, they lose 25% life per second while in combat. So you're going to be needing to resummon them quite often, but when you do, hey, it's good because they're going to be detonating for this massive chunk at the end. And additionally, while you're resummoning all your warriors, your mages are going to be super tanky. They're going to take 90% less damage and deal massively increased damage. So you're going to have your mages up pretty much all the time.
Jak se
and you're gonna be
przeczytacie,
focusing on resummoning
nie?
the warriors to run in there,
Moc
explode
unikatową
and
tego
do
unikatu
their damage that
i
way.
wyobraźcie sobie to w takiej gierce jak No Rest for the Wicked, gdzie jest taki fajny kombat, wyważony, przyziemny. I popatrzcie teraz na to, co tu się dzieje, nie? I sobie wyobraźcie, że będziemy tym kurwić, spamować jak pojebani.
Skeleton warriors, the skirmishers, they run up there. And then here's Blade of Zir, right? You get all those like skeleton warriors running out when you activate Army of the Dead. Not you just get the normal ones that are running around, but then they all you unleash a stream of them straight from you with the Sanguivar. Really impactful ultimate skill there.
Yeah, Army of the Dead is just so underutilized, so I'm so happy to see it come back into the fold.
It's great. All right, next
Ale
up we've got the one
ciała
we've been
fajnie
teasing for a
latają.
bit. Thank you, Ruben. The Rogue. Let's take a look at the idea with Rogue. So, as you probably guessed, the theme of Rogue this season is looking at trap builds, right, with both Death Trap and Poison Trap in a way. Historically, Poison Trap has been kind of underrepresented. Death Trap builds have been quite popular, pretty powerful, and a lot of fun to play. Poison Trap kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. It had a number of issues that we're looking to address this season. To really promote
Babaś, tak
Poison
samo
Trap
chciałem
as a viable
powiedzieć.
standalone build. And what we were seeing from Ruben was the Scoundrel's Leather rework. Now this is a unique chest item that's been in the game for a while. It was about traps in the past. We've done a rework this season where when you cast a trap, or rather every 10 seconds when you cast the trap, you're going to get a bonus death trap. So you could cast Poison Trap or Caltrops or Death Trap itself, and then you get a second death trap. And when you actually cast the death trap active button, you're going to kind of jump or teleport to that position, so you can just instantly get into the fray there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so rogues are all about mobility and jumping around the battlefield and doing that kind of thing. This is just another tool in their arsenal to really jump in, put the death trap down, which groups up some enemies, and then they're ready for you to slaughter there. But let's take a look at the new items that talk to Poison Trap specifically. The Bands of Icarus Rose, these are unique gloves that says your Poison Trap, which normally has a 9-second duration, it's always going to do its full damage over 3 seconds instead. So it's much shorter duration, but higher DPS. And it's always going to benefit from all of its upgrades, that enhancement and those modifications. You just get all of them. You don't need to put skill points in. And normally the two choices are mutually exclusive. You get both with these. And they're going to be even more powerful. Additionally, Poison Trap will now also benefit from your combo points if you're using those.
Nie
It's gonna
dostałem
have
po
no cooldowns
jednym?
during the inner sight if you're using inner sight. And if you're using
W sumie,
preparation,
kurwa, co ja
cooldowns
sobie
can be
myślałem?
reduced by the preparation trigger.
Jak na dodatek dostali
So
po 2 czy tam
previously,
po 3.
Poison Trap didn't really interact with any of these 3 mechanics very well, and now it benefits from whichever one you want.
That's so cool. So it really makes it more like a core skill, something I can work into my rotation.
Oh yeah, you're going to be wanting to use this very often with this unique. And then the aspect of contamination, as many builds that focus around poison on rogue often want to build critical strike damage, because that's really good with the poison imbuement. Poison Trap now also can scale up with some critical strike chance. So with aspect of contamination, it unleashes a poison burst when it detonates, like kind of initial upfront hit. And then if that burst critically strikes, which if
Dzięki
you're
Naiwek.
building a lot of crit chance, it
Robson,
probably will, or if
dzięki.
you hit a lot of enemies, then you're going to deal
Bardzo
increased poison
dziękuję
damage for a duration.
za te
So of course,
komentarze.
increase the rest of the duration of the Poison Trap. And this is probably my favorite clip here. Let's get a clip of this one. Right, so
Czyli zmiany polegają na tym, że mało ludzi grało na Poison Trap, bo był chujowy. No to dostajesz nową legendarkę na Poison Trap i nowy ten na Poison Trap.
Increased, it knocks them down for quite a while, and so they just take a little nap in your poison traps. I don't recommend it, but hey, if they do, they take a ton of poison damage.
I love the knockdown animation of this guy enemy.
Yeah,
So good.
this guy just falls right
sit
down.
Lay down, I guess.
His face is in
plant.
it too.
His face plants and then succumbs to the poison. It's awesome. All right, moving on, we've got our Sorceress. So the Sorceress class definitely is one of the ones currently on Season 7 that I think didn't
Dobra,
have any of
przeskoczcie
these
po
real
tych
big
tych,
outlier
może
builds
coś
that we
ciekawego
kinda
jeszcze
talked about. Some of
powiedzcie i
the
tyle.
highest highs come from
Jakby
like the Blood Necro,
nie jestem jakiś super zły ani zawiedziony, bo nie miałem żadnych oczekiwań. Te bossy mnie trochę zdziwiły, w sensie, że dostajemy nowych, tak z dupy i to akurat tych.
Those real outliers this season, and they were maybe felt like they were a bit behind of those. So as we talked about with other classes, we're definitely looking at bringing those outlier builds down a notch to bring them kind of back to the norm of some of the other builds, so they're not so far ahead. But for Sorceress, we're looking at improving some of the quality of life and some of the interactions
Też mam
between some of their
takie zdanie
mechanics, like
Garantron.
crackling energy, meteors and meteorites, and making sure they scale well with the build. Like crackling energy will now have the shock skill tag, so if you're building up damage for shock skills or some of the other synergies there, those now interact with your crackling energy. And additionally with meteor and meteorites, they're now going to be able to scale with each other's damage, which helps builds just be a bit more cohesive and feel more robustly supported. That being said, I think where Sorceress has been in Season 7 is in terms of like its power progression and the relative strength of its builds
Ale
against each other is
Moje postanowienie nie grania w gry usługi tak dużo dalej pozostaje na swoim miejscu. Mimo wszystko na sezon 8, tak? To już będzie? Kurwa, będzie pewnie w środku tygodnia. A, to chuj. Chciałem coś fajnego powiedzieć, ale zmieniam zdanie w locie. Generalnie chciałem powiedzieć, że wezmę sobie wolny piątek i sobie pogramy cały weekend w Diablo. Ale jak to będzie kurwa w środę start, czy we wtorek znowu, to chuj w dół. Cześć, Chasing Ghost.
And we want to do that in ways that make. We don't just want to slap on a 50x scaler on Sorceress. We want to make sure that the builds feel cohesive and coherent in a way that makes a lot of sense. And so that's what all the bulk of our focus is for this season. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit about ice shards. That's what the new unique is going to be working with here. Let's take a look at the unique, the Hail of Verglass. This is a unique helm that's going to empower your ice shards to spread out rather than shoot in kind of a straight line, that kind of rapid fire. It's now going to be a spread pattern. You can hit more enemies with it. And you get bonus shards. And you're going to be dealing increased damage for every time an ice shards damages an enemy. And it's going to stack up. So it takes a lot of stacks. You're going to be spamming ice shards, you're going to be hitting a lot. But once you do, it unleashes a lot of bonus damage. And it also just makes the skill, in my opinion, a lot more usable, right? I like the spread pattern a whole lot. Lets you hit wider screen, and you can kind of like shotgun enemies if you get close to them.
That's cool.
And Shivering Aspect, a new legendary aspect here. Enemies are going to take increased damage based on how much they're chilled.
W kwietniu dopiero?
Historically, some of the Frost Sorks or some other builds that were heavy on those crowd control effects.
Nie, baba, chyba coś pojebałeś. Marca chyba. Chyba nie chcesz mi powiedzieć, że my na początku marca pierdolimy o procentowych zmianach w czarce, które będą za 2 miesiące. Może lepiej na ponowne przejście kampanii w PoE2? Pewnie jeszcze sobie przejdę, ale to poczekam już na nową klasę jakąś czy coś. No co ty pierdolisz, babaś? Coś tu pierdolisz. Coś mi tu pierdolisz, panie. Coś mi się nie chce wierzyć. Bo akurat nie wierzę, że Blizzard jest tak zjebany.
Right, so they fire out pretty quick. They fire out in a nice spread, and you can clear through whole packs of skeletons with a single cast here.
Multi-shot.
Oh yeah,
multi-shot with ice shards.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right, and moving on to our final class here, the Spiritborn. So the Spiritborn,
kurwa, zapomniałem, że ta klasa jest w ogóle. Mówię, o, to chyba koniec, nie? A tu...
where it didn't have those crazy overpowered builds, but we think it's in a relatively healthy spot, and we're just looking at empowering new build options and making tighter synergies between the builds and giving you some new tools to play with. With that in mind, we took a look at Rushing Claw. It's one of my favorite skills on the Spiritborn, but never really found its way into any of the most popular builds in the past couple seasons since Spiritborn.
Zapomniałem, że w ogóle Spiritborn.
And we've updated the two
Twój link się chyba nie wyświetla, babaś.
kind of transformative.
Musiałbyś być chyba moderatorem.
If you pick one upgrade, the current one, Rushing Claws has 4 charges, and so when you use a charge, you kind of quickly dash through an enemy. And so you got 4 charges, you can spam it 4 times real quick. The other upgrade now has been reworked where it gains even more charges. It gains 12 charges. But using it consumes all the charges. So really it has just 1. But for every charge that it consumes, it deals massively increased damage and it hits a wider area. So now gaining cooldown reduction or gaining more charges actually just increases your damage output. And it promotes a very different play style for this. So you get kind of an option. You can choose the original version, which is still very powerful and very cool. Or you can choose the new upgrade and kind of spend all your charges at once, do a big kind of damage cooldown, and then work on building up those charges again.
To jest jakaś pomyłka, babaś.
Additionally, we've looked at storm feathers and specifically how they interact with the new unique item, the Sunbird's Gorget, which I think we've got a picture of right here.
To jest pomyłka.
So the Sunbird's Gorget is a new unique amulet. This really works to synergize with the Eagle and Jaguar builds. So it says picking up a Storm Feather, which you can create in many different ways, will form a firestorm around you for 8 seconds that deals fire damage. And every additional storm feather that you pick up is going to intensify this firestorm. It's going to make it grow in size up to a maximum, and then it's going to increase its damage output. For as many storm feathers as you can spawn, this firestorm is going to get more intense. But it only lasts for 8 seconds, so intensifying it or picking up more storm feathers,
Pokażcie, jak
it's
to
not
będzie
going to
wyglądało.
extend the duration. So it's kind of locked to that 8-second duration, and then it'll reset. So you really want to collect as many storm feathers as possible in 8 seconds, and then it
I,
resets.
czyli działa to tak,
And
w
also
skrócie
this
wam
firestorm
powiem.
is considered
Te nowe
an
zmiany
eagle,
działają
an
i te nowe
eagle,
itemy
jaguar,
działają
and
tak,
storm
że
feather skill. So you have lots of
chcielibyśmy,
options
za
on
mało
how you
gracie
increase
tą
this
klasą,
damage,
chcielibyśmy to
talent
zmienić,
choices,
więc
or your itemization.
bufujemy tego
You've got lots of
skilla,
options
którym najmniej
for
gracie,
how to
dajemy do
work
niego
this
unikat
into a
i
build,
dajemy do
either
niego
eagle or jaguar or
aspekt
both.
i macie build
And,
gotowy
following
w
up
tym
on the theme
momencie,
with
nie?
Rushing Claw, we've got the new rip and
No,
tear
teraz trzeba to
aspect,
wydropić
where
i
Rushing
grajcie
Claw is
tak,
going to
nie?
deal
Macie.
increased damage and is empowered based on how many charges you had when you cast it. So if you're taking the upgrade that gives you 12 charges, it's probably always going to be with 4+, and so it's going to strike an additional time. But if you're choosing the option where you spend each charge as you go, it's going to go through a bit of
Będzie
a cycle
podsumowanie
here. You get
oczywiście,
an additional
Łukasz.
strike, then it's
Postaram
gonna
się
get
jak
guaranteed
najszybciej
crit,
zrobić
then it's
na
gonna get
kanał
guaranteed
podsumowanie.
overpower, and when you just have one
I
charge
jeszcze
left,
z
it's gonna
Dartianem
give
się
you a nice
umówiliśmy
chunk
na
of
rozmowę
heal
w ten
to help
weekend,
keep you
żeby
in the
zrobić
fight.
sobie pogadankę o tym i też o tym pogadamy. Więc powinny być na dwa
lots of
baty.
different ways to play,
To
and it
ogarnięte.
works great with either way that Rushing Claw now works. All right, let's take a look at the Sunbird's Gorget in action here, right? So
O,
you're
właśnie,
moving
chciałem to
along,
zobaczyć.
you're picking up tons of these feathers, and the firestorm around you just grows in intensity. You got lots of different ways to scale it up, and it provides a nice kind of passive AoE around you as you're picking them up. And you're really going to want to make sure you're kind of thinking about exactly how your character's moving to make sure you're picking up as many of these storm feathers as
Przesunęli?
possible to
Dla mnie
maximize
lepiej,
your
że
damage output.
przesuwają i... Dla mnie, ja akurat jestem na tak. Niech
Alright,
se
that's,
dłużej porobią to,
that's a
kurwa.
lot. We got a lot of new class content coming for every class. We did get through all of them. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing all the new builds that these empower, how they modify old existing builds, and
kiedy ten
all the
PTR
interesting
startuje?
combinations that
Bo w
I'm
PTR-a
sure
bym sobie
all of you
pyknął
will test
taki
out on
1-2
PTR
dni.
and find out the most absolutely broken thing and let me know about it.
Yes, please let us know if you find something absolutely broken, which I'm sure you will. So thank you again.
Czekaj, czy on jest teraz class
for
designerem,
walking
tak?
through all the
Lead
different
class
changes. Again,
designerem?
this is,
To gdzie jest,
we do
kurwa?
plan on having,
on
patch
się
notes
zwolnił.
along with the blog related
tak,
to
kurwa, ten
everything,
ziomuś jeden.
tied to PTR. So there's other changes that we didn't actually cover off in here. That will be on the Diablo4.com immediately after the stream, so everyone can actually check it out, inspect it, do their theory crafting and everything related to that. Of course, with PTR, we kind of want to know when PTR actually begins. PTR is starting next Tuesday, and this is, of course, PTR on PC Battle.net, so players will be able to jump in starting on the 11th, and they'll run for
nie,
a week
11.
there. I will note that players actually will be able to also
Akurat kiedy mam popołudniówki.
pre-download the PTR the day prior, so around Monday afternoon here in California. I translate that using some sort of time tool. That will be when players will be able to pre-download, so it'll be about a day beforehand. One thing to
Akurat nie będę
note
mógł,
is,
kurwa,
of
grać.
course, the boost vendor, Marak, will be available, which will be dancing in town for everyone.
Jak mi obiecacie tak
But
po
one thing we
200-300
did wanna
zł
note is
każdego
that,
dnia
the
donate'ów,
boosts
to mogę robić
themselves
poranne
will be
streamy
available probably 2
od
days
8 rana
after the PTR actually
do
begins. The reason
12
behind
codziennie
this
z
is
tego
actually a little
PTR-a.
bit tied to how Season 7 performed. One thing
Dzięki
we
za moda?
allowed
Stary,
players
nie
to
ma
do was
sprawy, no
immediately
akurat
boost, the second they got
są
into
ludzie,
PTR,
którym
and we
bez
really
zastanowienia
didn't
mogę
get that
dać.
whole entire flow as we were kind of going
Yeah,
through.
the headhunt.
Jedynie
things like
dlaczego
that.
nie
So,
daję
we
tak,
also just wanna hear
tak
your
o
feedback
na lewo i
on the
prawo,
leveling process,
żeby po
right?
prostu
This is
potem
why we
cały
run the
czat nie
PTR.
był kurwa
We really
modami,
wanna
nie?
hear
Bo
your
to potem
thoughts on
chujowo
how the
wygląda.
sort of more uniform
Ale-
leveling feels, how the legendary drop rates feel. So that is really
Są
valuable
osoby,
to
które
us,
powinny mieć
for
moda.
launching a really awesome season 8 Return of
Exactly.
Belial.
Yeah, and
A nie
so
mają.
after a couple days, Marak
A tu akurat
will
przyszła
be
okazja,
more
no
than
to
happy
let's
to
go.
take your Paragon
Yeah.
levels to insane numbers. So PTR boosts will be available just a couple days after that. One other thing I do want to note is we will, of course, have our forums available and online for PTR. That is the best place to actually provide feedback. Of course, we do look in other places such as Reddit, Discord, etc. But I will say, like, the forums is kind of, we turn them on specifically, like a PTR section. So please put feedback in there because we are constantly checking in there for any notes, feedback from players on that end. One other note is within the PTR, you guys may see a term called the reliquary that may just kind of pop up here and there, and we haven't talked about the reliquary, nor will the blog later today actually be talking about the reliquary. I will say that you guys will hear more about the reliquary before the start of season
Ile
8
zrobiłem?
itself.
26.
But for
Nie grałem
right now,
od ostatniego streama, na którym
ignore it.
ogrywałem.
I don't know, turn a blind eye. I don't know. But it is a rework of our battle pass system that we're doing. We're trying to we've heard a lot of comments from players.
Rework
related
battle
to the
pass?
Trying to make it a little bit more customizable for people, especially for rewards that they're looking for. So we'll have a detailed breakdown of what the reliquary is before season 8. So looking forward to kind of sharing that
Ale
before
dojebali
we
na
actually
koniec.
kick off this season. And I know I have a lot. I'm trying to get through all my stuff. I know it's like I'm hungry.
Battle
the
Pass
last thing we do wanna talk about is-
resurrected.
I've gotten asked a million times about this, and I've even seen it in chat, and it's related to a roadmap for Diablo 4. And I will say that we are actively working on a roadmap that we can share with you all, which is great because it gives you and everyone a opportunity to kind of see more of like the future vision of what's coming for Diablo 4. We do plan on actually having this roadmap out before season 8. So we're really excited to share it. So as soon as we actually do have that available, we of course you'll hear it everywhere. We will be on every single microphone and megaphone out there showcasing what the roadmap is. And you've probably seen roadmap. If you're curious, like what does a roadmap entail? You've probably seen some of our fellow teams here at Blizzard, such as like Diablo Immortal or like World of Warcraft. They've actually posted these more public-facing roadmaps, and that's something that we want to do here, so that you guys have that ability of being able to see what's coming up for Diablo 4 and more exciting news related to it. So. I know we have Q&A. We want to jump into Q&A here really quickly. So if you guys do have any questions or anything, of course, we have our chat available on the Twitch link for Diablo. So feel free to jump in and ask any questions. I know we always queue it up with one question specifically. And do we have a question slide here? There we go. How does party play work with lair bosses? We kind of covered this a little bit, but I don't know if you guys want to go into specifically more detail.
Serio ktoś o to pyta?
Yeah, I can jump into that. So when you are fighting the lair bosses in a party and the horde spawns, when you open the horde, we essentially do a bonus chance for an extra drop based on the amount of party play. So if you're in a party of 4 and you open up that horde, it's going to guarantee an extra unique item. So it scales with the amount of parties or party members you have, and it's always a good time.
Ale głupie kurwa.
together with people.
Ja pierdolę. Ale to debilne był. Nie wiem, na chuj tało w
All right, let
ogóle.
me look through the questions here as people are dropping in questions. I have a team of people dropping questions to it. If you're ever wanting to know how we do this, we just have a Google Doc and we're copying and pasting questions from chat into there. So
Very high tech.
Very high tech, like super high tech. Let's see, this is from Skulm TV. Any
Cześć,
plans to
Piotrek.
place a blacksmith or vendor near the boss rooms to help people quickly salvage /
Ugh.
clear inventory without having to go into
Nie.
I think this is something that we can definitely take away and consider, especially with the revamp flow. That's definitely something that's interesting. One thing that the revamp flow does, I will touch on, is the amount of chain bossing really requires you to have a lot more materials. If anything, sort of some philosophy here is that we've heard a lot of feedback.
Zostawiam
that
leki,
it
uciekam,
feels
ściągam do
mandatory
lustrze. Cześć,
to play
Piotrek, cześć,
some
cześć,
of these
cześć.
bosses in a party just because chain bossing is so lucrative. And we do expect some amount of the chain bossing to come down a little bit because a lot more of the
Zero Name,
resources are being
nowe
consumed when
bossy,
opening those chests.
zmieniona
So,
mechanika
it's not a direct
łażenia na
answer
tych
to your
bossów,
question. I
mechanika
think it's an
sezonowa,
interesting
nowe
idea,
legendy,
but I do think
nowe
that chain bossing and
te
required
kurwa
trips and flow breaks to go back to town
moce
from
jakieś
some of
tam
these
na
bosses
legend,
is gonna come
nowe,
down a
sorry,
little
nowe
bit, especially
unikaty,
if you've been
nowe
playing-
moce
if you've been playing a ton
legendarne.
of partying.
Question
I awesome
from,
wszystko jest.
fan
Kilka debilnych
27,
rzeczy.
Q&A, or sorry, he wrote Diablo Q&A and I just read that out loud. Any
Fajne
chance
zmiany,
we
ale już za późno. Tak bym to
strongholds
określił.
And waypoints on every character.
Za dużo rzeczy spierdolili. Zwolnione levelowanie, T4 będzie dużo trudniejsze, dużo, 17 pitów.
bounty or apparition incursion, but I have to go get the waypoint. It's something the team has been talking about. There's no concrete plans today, which I know is disappointing, but it's something we know is a problem and something we 100% want to tackle in the near future.
Awesome.
So Last Epoch,
Joe
awesome.
Jones,
Last Epoch oglądamy?
says, this is actually a question that we were talking about that might actually come up, but like, would you consider adding the frog from Witch Powers in Season 7 as a permanent companion skill for druids? And At the moment, I can say we're not for that specifically, but it is a thing that I think we didn't really clarify in regards to what from season 7 is kind of like for sure staying over. I will say like the witch powers are most definitely like something that aren't carrying over completely over to the future seasons, but one thing in regards to at least the Tree of Whispers is that like we have a bunch of new NPCs there. We redid the layout there. That is made that as a hub that doesn't feel like I'm just going for the tree and I have to like immediately leave. It's made it as like a all-encompassing place that you can most definitely tap into from that end.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I can speak a bit to the seasonal powers. As we said, a lot of those witchcraft powers are specific to season 7. That is true. They are not necessarily coming back in season 8. But we do hear that feedback, right? I think they got a really positive reception. A lot of like the poison frog, one of my favorites, the fire bats, and all kinds of the other things that are very visually flashy and just a lot of fun to play with. We hear that, and that definitely helps us to inform like making future content. In the past, we've done that where we've taken some favorite seasonal mechanics, put them on items to return. I can't speak to any particular plans, but just know that we do hear this feedback, and it'll definitely help us to help craft content in the future.
We got a lot of questions related to PTR because I know, as I mentioned, this is a PC BattleNet PTR, and there's a few people like Kim from Canada, and I can't read this because the text color is so just jarring. But we've gotten a lot of questions related to PTR being on PC BattleNet and asking like, hey, is there any plans on bringing it to console, maybe Steam? I'll say the reason why PC BattleNet works best for us is that BattleNet is a platform that is housed here at Blizzard, and is the processes of getting builds up there, making it, like any type of change, especially for PTR where we're in a smaller window and we may need to change something really quickly. It gives us more flexibility and allows us to be able to
za ziomuś tam z tyłu, ta głowa?
I know with other platforms and everything, there's more
Że to jest niby z drzewa szeptów?
because they have
Wiecie, jak to
more checks and
wygląda?
balances and everything.
Jak
So it
prawdziwy
makes it a
Boba
little
Fett.
bit more difficult on our end to do some of those fast
Wiecie w
iterations
oryginalnej
that we
trylogii jak
do
wyglądał
PTR.
gościu
So
pod
in the
hełmem Boba
foreseeable
Fetta?
future right now, we
Właśnie
see
podobnie tak,
PC
zgooglajcie sobie.
BattleNet as being kind of the home for PC
Z ciekawości sobie
platforms to,
zgooglajcie.
end up testing anything.
To jest ten chłop, kurwa. Ja wam gadam.
Question from my computer's telling me to update. It's been telling me for weeks. Don't hate me, IT. Chris Mate says, will the lair bosses have resilience/damage reduction that the world bosses have to ensure that they just don't get one shot too fast with some classes or builds I can't talk today.
Trivializing. Yeah.
I
No,
can't even talk.
I think this is a great question. It's something we actually talk about on the team a bunch. And, from our perspective, adding something like resilience would sort of devalue that power progression. Like we feel like it sort of disservices that sort of 0 to hero. Once Belial was really hard, but now I've gotten so strong I can just crush him. That said, we do think that the level of one-shotting bosses that has been happening is a little bit too much. There isn't enough of a journey to get to a point where I can just stomp on Varshan or I can stomp on the Penitent Knight. So what we have done is, like Derek mentioned earlier in the stream, we've massively buffed a lot of these bosses. Like, so much so that we're kind of like, try it on the PTR and see. But a lot of these bosses should present more of a journey to getting to a place where you can really stomp on them throughout the torment tiers. Even Uber Lilith herself has been, or I don't remember what we actually call her.
Echo of Lilith. Echo of Lilith.
We just keep calling her Uber Lilith
Uber
internally.
Lilith,
Now
it's
it's
fine.
just stuck. Yeah.
Has seen quite a buff. And that should mean that journey to getting to a place where you're really farming some of these bosses is a lot more fulfilling, but it's longer also. You're not just like walking into Torment 1 and one-shotting Varshan.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into what I talked about with some of the outlier builds that were just like Bloodwave Necro, prime example of being something where you get one item and then suddenly you can one-shot everything. It's really not, it doesn't promote the best gameplay. Like it's just, like, it's fun for a little bit to go in and one-shot everything, but that's something we think it's much more engaging to have a little bit of back and forth, and you're not just going in and stomping them, but you do feel powerful. Feel some power progression. And as you get more powerful and more gear and more Paragon levels, you do get more powerful, and it becomes easier to overcome these challenges, and then you start feeling that real powerful stuff as you really complete your build.
Yeah, and I'll also say, like, I think part of how we originally set up the boss ladder, it really did encourage the one-shotting behavior, right? Like, if you have to pay materials to fight this boss, why would you ever fight the boss when it's actually a challenge, right? You would only fight it when it's really difficult. But the changes that we've made have really sort of, you know, in a fun way, I'm hoping this plays out, that you can sort of maybe get a cheeky run in on Varshan when maybe he's really hard, but you get a really powerful, unique, because you don't have to risk anything anymore when to actually summon him.
Yeah, I think it also kind of speaks to just the approach of injecting challenge across the lair bosses. Like we discussed, you know, we could just do straight stat boosts and that would definitely resolve it. But within Season 8, the team took the extra opportunity to also just inject new mechanics and updated mechanics to the lair bosses across the board
To jestem ciekaw tych nowych
introduce
mechanik.
that hiked challenge, but in an interesting way that's just more fun, I guess, really for us to enjoy.
We have a question related to, I'm going to speed through a few last questions here. Lilith, will Lilith ever make a entry into maybe the boss layer system or anything? This is from Ganon North.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've been thinking about, and like what's the right place and what's the right time for something like that.
Nie będzie.
She's in an interesting spot now where she's kind of like the pinnacle of the season's journey a lot of times, and that's something we can definitely think about, especially with this revamped flow of being able to summon the bosses. So we can definitely take that into consideration. That'd be a lot of fun.
Quick question related to the Spiritborn. This is from the Schwab. Does the new Russian Claw aspect power give you all the previous bonuses at 4+ charges, or just the extra cast?
It's just the extra one. So it's so if you're casting it at 4 or more charges, it only hits an extra time. It does not get guaranteed crit or overpower.
Albo dobra, to na filmie
or heal
powiem.
you. It's you kind of either progress through one benefit at a time, or you just get the 4+ if you're using the new upgrade.
I'm going to do 2 quick last questions. I will end on the one that everyone's asking. I see it in chat. Don't worry. In regards to, I lost it. There it is. From Mid Central Vowel, at what point will you start maybe potentially removing uniques that have proven to be not that useful? Or do you guys feel like uniques are feeling bloated in the current setup?
I think I actually feel like we don't
Drukareczki nie
necessarily
słychać?
have
Teraz
enough
nie
uniques
przebija?
in terms of speaking to every
Teraz
skill.
zapierdala
Like, I
głośno.
think that's something that you see with the poison trap and you see with ice shards. That is sort of why we have the boss ladder, to give you more deterministic, or maybe not deterministic, but targeted ways to find some of the uniques you're looking for. This lets us have a lot of different uniques, but things that you actually have to target. The other thing I'll just say too is, like, part of the game is random items and figuring out how to assemble a build out of the random items. So like, we don't want to get to a place where I just sort of log into Diablo and I get all the uniques I want, and then
Dzięki
I'm
Huba
sort of done
za
with the game, and
komentarz.
it's just sort of this linear deterministic track through getting the pieces that you want. But that said, like, we're always sort of listening to the feedback, and if it does start to feel like where I'm just constantly sifting through things I don't care about, those are things that we can absolutely take a look at.
Yeah, and I think on the design side, when we're looking at unique designs, I think there are still some spots in the game, like with Poison Trap this season, where there were some skills or some play styles that had had some threads there, but it wasn't really a complete and cohesive build, and still require a bit more support. So we're still going to be looking for those opportunities to support builds or play styles that we think are interesting and fun.
To za muzyka w
with
tle? Od
new
nich.
uniques
Puszczam
every
takie
season. But
low-fi
additionally, we are also taking a look at
muzyczki
kind
z
of
Diablo. One są u nich na
catalog of
kanale,
uniques we
ale
have
to
in the
oni
game.
puszczają,
So
nie ja.
a good example on Rogue, again, is the Scoundrel's Leather this season. That was an item that was sometimes played, but not often for its actual unique effect. For some of its affixes, actually, it was pretty powerful. But its unique effect was pretty lackluster, and so we've done just a whole rework on it. We said, hey, what's the identity of this? Well, it's talking to Death Trap builds in a way, but in a way that wasn't super compelling. And so we said, well, let's kind of scrap that existing effect, and how can we better support that? Let's take another try at this. So that's one way that we're going to look at, to find those underused uniques that really maybe don't find a home. We're going to constantly be reevaluating them and seeing how we can kind of plus them up and make them achieve the potential and fulfill that build niche that they were intended to do in the first place.
All right, I'm going to end it with the last question, because everyone's asking this related to aspirational content. Are there more plans for that? Things like whether it's
Aspirational
potential
content.
leaderboards to more like endgame type of features and stuff.
To mnie ciekawi.
Where are we in regards to some of that?
Yeah, I'll say the team absolutely, this is top of mind and something that we absolutely want to improve in terms of adding more milestones for you to reach, more satisfying and more rewarding milestones and celebrating those milestones. So the team is actively sort of looking at what are ways that we can level up some of the aspirational feel of the game. I'll also say just in Season 8, again, a lot of the torment tiers and bosses have really been leveled up. And I'll say, again, the pit has been pretty massively buffed. So there are some tuning changes we've made just to make the game, the pieces that we have today, a little bit more aspirational and challenging and satisfying to overcome. We really think Season 7 was a fun candy rush, and it was a sugar rush, sort of like the smoothies everyone's binge drinking behind the scenes.
Not everyone.
Not everyone, yeah. Only the important
There's a
people
note
behind
now
the
that
screen.
says that it got delivered midstream.
Oh,
Stoked.
okay, wow.
Yeah, Marcus redeemed.
Yeah, but Season 7 was really fast, and we do think when the game reaches that state of where just nothing really, you have to work for it, and it's just really fast, and it's over in a weekend, totally, there's not enough things to work towards. So we are sort of taking an approach, again, with some of the balance changes to make some of the game feel a little bit more aspirational, and it's a focus for our team going forward.
Yeah, I will say we've had conversations about this. I feel like almost weekly. Colin and I talk about it a whole lot. I know there's a lot of discussions happening and a lot of people.
Okej, czyli niby wiedzą o tym, że to jest problem i cały czas nad tym będą pracować.
Thanks to you guys for
Pytanie,
jumping
jakim to
in,
wyjdzie.
and to Ruben, of course, for jumping into the build and running through everything. Again, PTR is going to be starting next Tuesday. You can early download on PC Battle.net starting Monday afternoon California time. And we will have a blog and patch notes and everything.
Mi się wydaje, że to
available for
jest
people to check out immediately
o
after the
rok
stream.
za późno.
Really looking for
O czym
everyone
wiedzą?
jumping
Że
in,
wszystko za
testing
szybko
out,
znajdujemy i że
the
gra jest na
new boss
weekend.
lair
I że nie ma
system,
aspiracyjnego
of course,
kontentu.
the new powers that are associated with it,
W sensie,
all the class changes,
kumają
all the
to
quality of
niby.
life stuff that we talked about in terms of
Pytanie,
like the
kogo oni
leveling
mają
journey
na
as it's
myśli.
going up, within this new season. So really looking forward to everyone jumping in. Please make sure to take advantage of giving us your feedback on the forums or Reddit or Discord, other places. We're going to be most definitely checking it out.
Mi tam jest zajebiście spoko właśnie, że
Thank you
jest
guys
fast.
again. We have
No
March
tobie
of
jest
the
spoko, ale
Goblins,
ogólnie gra
which
przez to
is,
cierpi.
currently going on in Diablo 4, and we have a
Ty to robisz 3
D2R
tygodnie, no
ladder reset
widzisz.
tonight. So if you're a big D2R person, like, feel free to jump in. It's always
W skrajności
a fun time.
to
We
jest
will
chujowa
see you
statystyka.
guys in the PTR next week and
Znajdzie
really
się ktoś,
appreciate
kto
it.
tego,
Thanks all.
kto kurwa 10 level bije, czy tam 20 level bije w powiedzmy, nie wiem, 2 tygodnie i on powie, że dla niego to jest za wolno i proszę mi to przyspieszyć, nie? Pytanie, czy zdanie takiego kogoś mamy brać pod uwagę? Chyba nie. What do you think, guys? Dlatego są inne gry. Nie wchodźmy w tą dyskusję może.
Heart is racing.
O, jest.
Wow.
Let's go.
Jest kondys, ogląda kogoś innego.
Oh my gosh.
It's gonna be such.
Well, welcome in
Overjoyed.
everybody. Thank you so much for the
It's
raid.
gonna be so overjoyed. Okay,
Wow.
I'm gonna put some music in the background. Also.
Co ten kondys?
We want some music.
No, ładna
let's go
tapetka.
with Diablo Lo-Fi because I love this track. Let's go with the.
Czemu on po angielsku streamuje?
One. Oh, okay. Very strong guitar. Okay, patch notes when. Blizzard patch notes when. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum.
No jak się patrzy na to, że masz 2,5 miliarda graczy, a hardkorowych masz ile? Nie ma, Diablo nie ma 2,5 miliarda graczy po pierwsze. To po pierwsze, a hardkorowych masz ile albo streamerów tak naprawdę, ale to nie chodzi o to, tu chodzi o to, że normalni gracze za szybko do tego dochodzą. Normalni, nie robiąc nic, z zamkniętymi oczami, śpiąc, robią to w weekend.
There's gonna be a link somewhere, but you can also go with alerts. Vibe. Vibe.
powiedzieli, że 50% dochodzi do T4.
can go on the
No tak, bo umiera z nudów przedtem, no.
check for the chat if I can.
Czy jest...
Turn on the fridge? No. You're not turning on the fridge, I can lower volume a little bit.
Czy Kondys przeszedł na angielski, czy on po prostu gada po angielsku z widzem jakimś?
Yeah, and we should be here. Hello guys.
A jest, po angielsku do końca streama, bo na YouTube, z oficjalnego kanału.
YouTube stream. Let's even enable you guys to speak without subbing because I know that not everyone wants to sub to a random guy. Hello everyone, I'm Condis. I'm a max roll Barbarian guild.
A, dobra.
What the hell?
Już
There's
wszystko
no
kumam.
Diablo 4 yet. Maybe there's gonna be some. I'm a Diablo 4.
Dobra, nieważne. Do powodzenia tam, Kondys, zostawiam łapkę, bo ja jestem kozakiem. I zostawiam łapki. Dobra, moi kochani. Ale nie 50% ludzkości, tylko 50 grających. O, Marcin, to jest dobry ten. Rajda dostał od Blizzarda i po angielsku gada. A, okej, dobra. Trailer Last Epocha. O! Last Epoch. Oglądanko. Ten pociąg już odjechał. Widzę, że kiszak. 6 miesięcy temu przereklamowane. Official trailer. Ty, oglądałem. A, pewnie usnąłem i poleciał po prostu jako jakiś ten. O, jaka ładna animacja.
Come to the right place, traveler. And in this time, you can share in her embrace.
Szeloba, kurwa. Nie, tego nie widziałem. A, oglądam jakieś fragmenty u Maciejczaka. Stones of the Erase. Kurwa, animacje by poprawili tego biegania, bo... Wolven Echoes. Okej, czyli jakiś... Aha. Dodatek do monolitu, tak? New bosses. O, ładne. Centennial rework. A było coś z nim źle, tak? Ale ładnie wygląda. Ten atak fajnie wyglądał. Alright. Heartseeker. O. Champion enemies. Champion enemy affixes. Ok. Wolven offerings. New endgame crafting materials. New items and uniques. Ale najebali unikatów. Mastery specialization. Endgame set item crafting. Inventory tabs. O! Ej, w Diablo to już dawno jest. Halo. Dungeon Key Charms. Okej. WSAD. Beta support. Okej, to jakiś bossior. Nawet nie walczyłem z tymi bossami.
Rejoice, traveler. We've prepared a silken tomb for you, woven with golden strands, that even you cannot break. Join us, traveler.
Powiem wam tak, szczerze. Powiem wam, co o tym myślę, tak szczerze. O, teraz czy słuchać drukarkę mi powiedzcie, bo teraz jest cisza kompletna, nie ma dźwięków w tle, a może mi się przebijać. W 100% będąc z wami szczery, to jeżeli to by sezon PoE startował, czy jakiś reset bety PoE po 9 miesiącach by startował, to bym się jarał. Bo mam mega dobre wspomnienia z kampanii PoE, przechodziłem 2 albo 3 razy i za każdym razem była dojebana w kosmos. I powiem wam, że jakbym miał teraz jakiś nowy kontencik tam robić i przechodzić tą kampanię, to się cieszę, bo mega frajdą było przechodzenie tej kampanii. Czego nie mogę powiedzieć o Last Epochu. Nie mówię, że była zła, ale walki z bossami nie przyniosły mi żadnego wyzwania, żadnego, zerowe. W zasadzie nie było żadnego bossa, którego bym się tam zatrzymał na chwilę. Chyba, że pamiętacie coś takiego ze streama. A w PoE właśnie to, że się zatrzymywałem na bossach, że się zatrzymywałem na niektórych lokacjach, że trzeba było przysiąść, że trzeba było grać ostrożnie, a już nie wspominając o graniu w party, że było dojebane. Ale na mnie nie robi wrażenia na ten moment to, że zreworkowany zostaje Centennial na przykład, gdzie ja nie wiem, gdzie był problem, kurwa, w nim. Druga sprawa, nie robi na mnie wrażenie tam 50 itemów nowych, wypadających, skoro ja nie poznałem tam wszystkich buildów, nawet podstawki. Nie wiem, które są fajne, które nie są fajne, czy będzie z nich użyteczna część, czy nie. Jakbym znał tą grę bardzo dobrze, podejrzewam, że jak część z was, to pewnie bym się jarał, nie? Że o, nowe buildy, nie? Dla mnie teraz te wszystkie tam buildy to będą nowe po prostu. Nawet teraz jakbym odpalił grę, to większość buildów dla mnie kurwa jest nowych, nie? Więc dla mnie nie trzeba nowych itemów nawet. Ja tam połowy nie znam, nie doszedłem do końca endgame'u. W sensie do końca endgame'u, no nie doszedłem do... nie wiem, pobiegałem trochę tych takich dziwnych mapek i nic tam więcej nie było z tego co pamiętam, jakiegoś super dojebanego. Na Lagonie miałem laga? Możliwe. Nie pamiętam. Na pewno nie było to coś, co mi zapadło w pamięć, tak jak jebany boss z drugiego aktu z PoE 2. Tak jak, no ja wam inaczej. Z Path of Exile nie pamiętam żadnych bossów. Przepraszam. Z Last Epocha nie pamiętam żadnych bossów. Z Path of Exile pamiętam praktycznie wszystkich. Taka jest różnica. Czajcie? I to dosyć ważna różnica. Czyli co? Rozumiem, że nic nie słychać tam w tle, że tam łazi coś. Ja sobie potem to i tak odsłucham. Co, dzisiaj będzie streamek z tego. Gdzie będzie? Na Twitchu jakimś albo gdzieś? Kurwa, ale te streamy mają po 2 godziny. No to ciężko. Ciężko będzie, moi kochani, bo ja mam na rano do pracy. Uraxa i Ziza. I z twórcami Last Epocha, tak? A, to będzie długie.
I'll see you on Zizran stream. We're gonna do an interview with EHG.
Czy Rax oglądał? Oglądał. Jaka reakcja?
So the first quality of life update that we added was just simply printing the name of the boss that resides within the dungeon. You know, one of the kind of ambiguities that we have.
Kurwa, miny nie ma zbyt zajaranej.
Version of this meaningful way, but also which bosses do we is the new, exalted pinnacle challenge within.
Ma tak zawsze, czy po prostu go to w ogóle nie jara?
Challenge, the highest reward. And he also has some very unique reward-related tricks up his sleeve that I'll cover a little bit later. So for now, just know that Belial's back, and he's also just not joining the party alone. He's bringing a couple of friends from our Vessel of Hatred. So first up is our buddy Urvar. So Urvar's joining the roster of the lair boss ladder system. He's going to be filling out kind of like the lowest rung of the ladder. So he's going to be joining the party with the Varshans and the Beast and Ice and whatnot. So connection to his larger supreme form.
Chcę zobaczyć jego
Pretty
reakcję.
big overview and a lot of talking in charts.
A wygląda jak miał wypierdolone w ogóle na to całkowicie.
So, yeah, no, I think this is about all we might want to show of this guy.
Yeah, we probably won't go into it. We don't want to spoil all the mechanics and everything. Even though we're kind of also spoiling a little bit of like a rogue build.
Keen-eyed amongst you might have noticed some interesting things on Rogue, which I'll get to in a bit.
It's spoiled of the infernal ladder. The supreme.
A on jakoś to skomentuje, czy... Widzę, że reakcję miał podobną do mnie. Cześć, chcę to zobaczyć. Jak zobaczył ten ekranik.
24 targeted bosses across Sanctuary. So we have 24 collectible carrying the illusion is powers. Let's go to the next slide. That kind of leads us into the
nie
collectible
patrzy.
boss powers, or seasonal powers.
Nie ogląda tego. Teraz to zobaczy i zrobi facepalma, tak?
So the theme for the powers theme for season 8 is boss powers. So Belial being kind of like the
Nie patrzy. Bo widać, że coś pisze. Dobra, nieważne. Nie będziemy czekać na to, ale wydaje mi się, że tak jest. Kruchol z brodatym. Z brodatym. Pogadankę mają o campfire'ze. Kruchol
W filmiku jest po prostu.
ma bardzo ładne tło.
You can read our blog and patch notes here. Jest. What you need to know. Dobra, jest. Mamy to. Nie są to patch notesy, tylko wypisane po kolei rzeczy, które tam będą.
Ale to
Znalazłeś?
rzuć linka też od razu. Właśnie ja tak się mieszam i nie widzę, bo szukałem w sumie patch notesów. No, już wytłumaczone do czego.
Czekaj.
Ale jak masz to rzuć, to od razu sobie wyświetlę, już nie będę grzebał.
Moi kochani,
Bardzo.
ja będę kończył na dzisiaj.
A,
Pies z pokoju wyszedł. O kurwa, to zajebiste, muszę sobie to kurwa zapisać.
4 powery są.
Moi drodzy, ja wam wrzucam linka do Kruchola. Odwiedźcie go, pozdrówcie od Ksazaksa. On rozkręca dopiero swój kanał, fajnie by mu dać kopa. Chłop się stara, nie poddaje się, za co ma wielki szacun. Pozdrówcie na czacie ode mnie.
To powinno być do zdobycia tylko na te 4.
To było nawet z podkulonym
Nie, no,
ogonem.
ale tak samo jak teraz jest, nie? Że sobie te Witch Powers wbija.
Pies zobaczył i o pierdolę to. Pozdrówcie Kruchola, a ja postaram się nagrać jakieś podsumowanko na jutro. Dzięki. Pamiętajcie moi kochani, na Enebie dzisiaj PL Deal kod jest i macie 8% zniżki. Możecie kliknąć w mój link i zerknąć i jakie kurwa można rzeczy fajne tam złapać.
Czy to będzie na mapie?
Wbijajcie do Kruchola moi kochani, wbijajcie do Kruchola.
Czekaj, Belial makes it feel
Chcę zobaczyć wasze wiadomości na czacie. Pozdro od wujka. Damy radę? Damy radę.
Aha, czyli w różnych obszarach sanktuarium.
Tak,
Dobra,
co
już
kilka
widzę.
minut.
Przecież damy radę, no.
Kilka minut w dziczy.
Once you arrive,
Dobra.
start some imposters back. Aha, monsters can be-
Dawać, wbijać do Kruchola.
Klepiemy potworki. I jak je zabijemy, nabijemy tego boss powera, nie? Znaczy pojawi się Belial i wtedy boss powera jakieś dostaniemy. I boss zostawia nam te matsy, żeby sobie te powery upgrade'ować, tak samo jak jest teraz w tym sezonie.
No
Rajdzik na
tylko
Kruchola,
te
no,
bossy,
wbijajcie
albo ogólnie
tam.
Wszystkie bossy
Nie
tam
widzę
się
żadnych
liczyły
wiadomości tam.
do repy, nie?
Na czacie u niego.
Tak.
Zakładam. Bo no nie oszukujmy się, repa będzie.
Możecie napisać, że wujek marudzi, żebyście wbijali.
O, że...
Yy,
Co tu
w
mamy?
tym sezonie widzę taki problem, że jeżeli będzie się to kręciło wokół bicia bossów, to będzie się wolniej wbijał Battle Pass
No,
i możliwe właśnie, że repa też będzie wolniej leciała, no bo jednak będzie ta repa pewnie tylko też za bossów dawana.
a, że repa za bossy.
Zależy, no zakładam, że za bossów, no bo cały czas tak było, nie?
Babaś,
I
plus
jak
1.
były te jakieś korupcje.
Ja
i tak
tu
dalej,
patrzę,
tylko też za
kto
tego
wbija.
skorumpowanych
Widzę.
potworów
Widzę, Kuba,
w
że nie macie
tych
tam.
Helltide'ach w danym miejscu.
Widzę, że nie pozdrawiasz od
były
wujka.
liczone punkty, więc obawiam się, że tutaj tylko bossy, wszystkie bossy będą się liczyły. Niby
Kto tu jeszcze jest
bo
na
i tak te
czacie u
bossy
nas?
Będziemy farmić i tak.
Zanim skończymy. Nightbot!
Okej, tutaj o tych bossach możemy
Nightbot,
sobie
wypierdalaj do
rzucić
Kruchola.
okiem. Czyli podział na 3
Babać jest. Nervus, Szymek,
części
Garnitron.
tego bossów. Podstawowe, wielkie
Marcin.
i ten.
No,
jak
drugarka
fajnie
powoli
napisali,
kończy.
Exalted.
A
Jak
może już
fajnie.
skończyła?
Może, no.
Exalted.
Exalted Bosses.
No.
Pozdro dwójka. A, też pozdrawiamy. Siema babać.
Pozdrawiamy.
Pozdrawiamy.
No, coś tam
tu
się
jest
drukuje.
Lair boss loot. I tu jest takie zdanie napisane. Each player must
No.
individually spend boss materials to open their hoard. Czyli klepiemy w czwórkę i każdy musi mieć swój klucz, żeby otworzyć skrzynkę bossową, nie? To masz tutaj napisane. I też jest napisane, że za każdego gracza w party boss ma 33%, że kolejnego unikata jeszcze rzuci.
Boże, wkręciłem się i słucham teraz
Kurwa,
Kruchola.
na boss będzie trzeba w party chodzić, żeby wyciągnąć z nich jak
czyli
najwięcej.
w sumie nic nowego, no.
Dobra,
Tylko co,
uciekam moi kochani.
Tak jakby tą skrzynkę otwierał Matsem, tak jakby. Tak?
Widzimy się w weekend na jakimś filmach. Na pewno na jakichś filmach się zobaczymy. Prawdopodobnie już jeszcze dzisiaj albo jutro rano
Okej.
No, each boss
Czyli co?
requires a layer boss.
pojawi się
Czyli
filmik.
w zasadzie będzie trzeba biegać na bossy w party, ale każdy
Tymczasem
będzie miał swoje matsy, żeby otwierać
Do
swoje
następnego.
Czyli nie będzie sensu, żeby ktoś
Pa, pa!
kto nie ma kluczy, bo i tak tej skrzynki nie